before we get into that, I want to thank the sponsors of the podcast. I want to thank Go Hunt, the optics department. My friend Cody Nelson of 20-plus years is the optics manager. If you guys have any optical needs at all, spotting scopes, tripods, binoculars, rifle scopes, anything to do with glassing, if you'd like to purchase any optics, give Cody a call at 702-847-8747. That's extension 2. You can also send him an email at optics@gohunt.com. He answers those emails himself. He answers those phone calls himself. Make sure to tell him that I sent you, and he's going to take care of you. I want to thank Go Hunt for their sponsorship. I also want to thank KUIU Ultralight Hunting. KUIU is the gear that I wear on all my hunts. You can find out more about KUIU going to kuiu.com. I want to thank KUIU. Also, PhoneScope. If you use the JScott19 promo code, PhoneScope is the digiscoping adapter I use to video and take photos on all my hunts. Use the JScott19 promo code. You're going to get a 10% discount there at phonescope.com. That's PhoneScope, and that's SKOPE, phonescope.com. Also, onxmaps.com. OnX I use on all my hunting and fishing trips. I actually use it in my real estate business as well. It's got a great private public land overlay. You can see who owns certain properties. You can see the boundary lines. I was just using the app this morning, tracking my progress in, looking for a specific trail camera that I had set. Go to onxmaps.com, use the JScott19 promo code. You're going to save 20% on the OnX phone app. Guys, thanks for listening to this podcast. Appreciate all your support. If you'd like to send me a message, you can on Instagram at direct message at jscottoutdoors. You can also send me an email, jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. Let's get right to this episode.
Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have a friend of mine, Chris Rowe from Rowe Hunting Resources. I've known Chris for a while now, and Chris is a wildlife biologist and really has his finger on the pulse of animal behavior. Chris, Rowe Hunting Resources focuses on animal behaviors, and one of the things that I specifically like about what Chris is doing at Rowe Hunting Resources with his content that he has online through his modules, he has elk modules, deer modules, and turkey modules, is he actually focuses on what exactly the animals are saying. And one of the things that I can benefit from that is, you know, not just out there making elk calls or not just out there making turkey calls. I can actually go, oh, this is what the animals are saying, or this is what the animals need to be hearing right now, instead of just making a blind cow call. Chris's modules have really helped me, and I'm excited to have him on the show today to talk about Rowe Hunting Resources, and specifically today about his elk hunting module. Chris, how you doing?
Doing all right, brother. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. I'm excited to have you on, and I've had some great guests on the podcast talking about elk calling, and one of the things I wanted to have you on is because I believe there's a fundamental difference in, say, philosophy of Rowe Hunting Resources and some of the things that you offer, as opposed to some of my other guests that are phenomenal callers and are very good in their own right. But your stuff seems to be a little bit different. Do you feel that there's a difference in philosophy a little bit?
I do. Obviously, I mean, I think probably I'm a little biased, but I mean, first and foremost, you're right. I've listened to most of your podcasts, and there's so many different ways to, they talk about so many different ways to skin a cat. There's so many different ways to hunt elk and call elk, and there's really no right or wrong way. I'm not gonna say, but I think you're right. From my standpoint, I really do personally put a lot of focus in understanding why elk do what they do, and when they vocalize, what are they saying, and what are they trying to accomplish when they're saying it. I really do believe, and I think our elk module shows this clearly, elk do have certain vocalizations. They have words, just like we use words in our everyday lives in the English language or whatever language you speak. Elk are the same. They are a very dynamic social species, and they absolutely have specific vocalizations that they use for very specific purposes, and they expect a very specific outcome from that vocalization. And for me, understanding what those are, why they say them, has allowed me, because this I think is another difference for Row Hunting Resources in the fact that our module, I hunt by myself. I hunt solo. I do not hunt generally with another group of guys. I do not have anybody calling for me back behind me. And if I do go hunt with somebody, sure, I will call for them and with them. But 99.9% of the time, I'm the one doing the calling and I'm doing the shooting, which means I have to put an elk in front of me, in front of my effective range, in front of that opening. And I also hunt on very heavily hunted public ground to where, if I call too much, or if I call a lot, or if I get an elk worked up and he's bugling his brains out, in 5-10 minutes there's going to be another hunter coming down the ridge, and that just gives it a chance to blow the opportunity. So I think my approach and what I teach and what I share on Row Hunting Resources is more of a focus to what are they doing, why are they doing it, understanding why they do what they do, so the solo hunter can go out there and have a high level of confidence to say, okay, if I blow a cow call, not only do I know what cow call I'm going to blow and why I'm going to blow it, but more importantly, I know what the elk is going to perceive, I know what they're going to think, and I should have a reasonable expectation of what the outcome of my engagement is going to be. And that way, and when you start to understand why elk start doing things, I think it gives you much more flexibility in any situation that you're in to adapt and change to the situation and do what is needed to get that animal in front of you. And I talk about call them to your toes. I like calling elk to 10 yards and killing them point blank, and that's what Row Hunting Resources elk module is about.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing I might point out about the elk module is, there's all kinds of advanced resources, there's tons of educational, but one of the things that I think is so incredible about the module is the fact that everything that you talk about, you have video to show the elk doing that sound or acting in that certain behavior, so that, and that's what relates to me so much, is that, I can watch your elk behavior, I can watch the see you first, the doorway, I can listen to all of the different cow elk and bull elk vocalizations where you've broke down specifically on the module per video. You've got the chirp, the mew, the lost mew, the assembly mew, the demanding mew, the selfish mew. You've got, and many more. You've got contact bugles, dominant bugles, chuckles, check bugles, roars. I guess my point is you have dissected elk vocabulary and elk behavior, and you're able to show that with video, which to me, I'm kind of a visual guy, and I kind of need to see it, and then I need to kind of hear it, and then go, oh, I've heard that all the time. That's what, Chris is calling a challenge bugle, or that's what he's calling a selfish mew, and oh, I've heard that. I thought that was, the estrus call. Oh, now I see it. And now I can relate to what I've seen in the woods, and I think that's what's so awesome about Row Hunting Resources, and I think that's some of the every season before elk season, when I spend a lot of time on Row Hunting Resources in the elk module, that's what I take away from it.
Well, I'll agree. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because for two reasons. Number one, the real easy one is I've always been the type of person, I started my career out as far as, this type of stuff, giving seminars, and, I've attended a bunch of seminars over my life, and anybody can get up and flap their gums at you, and some people are better at it than others, but unless you see it happening, a lot of times you have this doubt in your mind. You're like, I don't know about that. Well, that's the whole point of why we do the video. I can flap my gums and I can tell you anything I want to tell you. But it's not until I can show you, say, okay, if I'm going to talk about a glunk, or if I'm going to talk about assembly mu or whatever, then I can say, here's what it is, here's what it means. Don't believe me, don't take my word for it. Watch this next video, or next 5 or 10 or whatever, and watch the elk do it themselves. But more importantly, watch and listen, and then watch the body language, watch the posturing, and watch the other elk react to that. Now, that's what I love about it. But the other thing that I hope, and you and I have talked about it before, you just nailed it, that everybody learns differently. Some people learn by reading, some people learn best by doing, other people learn from a visual. Well, what we try to do with our videos is do a little of everything. We try to have it to where it's very visual, so that way you can hear it, you can see it, you can practice with it, and you're not practicing with me, you're practicing with a cow elk, you're practicing with a bull, or you're practicing with 10 other bulls, or whatever. So, yeah, I having the video, and that is also why we do everything online, because the module is like a library. So, we were talking about before this, I'm literally sitting in front of my computer right now, and I've got about a dozen new videos that I'm working on that are going to be uploaded to the Elk module this summer. It's, you have instant access to so many video resources that you can't do with a book, you can't do with a magazine. You can do it kind of with a DVD, but then you have to keep buying a tangible item. With what we do on the line, man, you can take it with you wherever you want it.
Well, yeah, you can use it on your mobile device.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be in elk camp if you have service, and you can be pulling some of that stuff up to get, refreshers of, what just happened that morning, and, this is what they were doing.
Yeah. No, I'm proud of it, but I'm glad you like it, and I know that a lot of other people like it too, and so.
And not to mention to have the forum where it's Row Hunting Resources members, it's subscribed to the elk module, being able to ask questions and chat with each other, having watched some of the videos and listened to some of your explanations and be able to, dive into it deeper. And not only that, have you come in and, kind of lead the conversation along is an incredible resource. Chris, one thing that when I first heard it, it just blew me away, and it really made a lot of things, kind of come full circle. And that is talking about your elk behavior, talking about the doorway, talking about see you first, hear you second, smell you third. Can you talk to me a little bit about those things?
Yeah, you bet. I truly believe that I don't care if you listen to anything that I talk about on my calling. I don't care if you're the best caller in the world. It does not matter if you don't have your setup right. And I think that one thing right there, above all else, if an elk hunter takes a minute to focus on getting their setup right, then so many other things are going to fall into place from a success standpoint of your calling effort, and all the way down to finally, punching your tag, having a shot opportunity. And again, when we're talking about solo hunting, that is even more critical. Everybody always talks about elk that hang up. They hung up at 80 yards, they hung up at 100 yards, or whatever. They hung up just out of range. And quite honestly, the fact that elk hang up just out of range is why the two-person or multiple caller strategies essentially became developed, because you put the shooter out front, you put the callers in the back. That way, you're pulling the bull past that shooter, because he's if he's responding to the callers that are 100 yards away, well then hopefully if he quote unquote hangs up 100 yards from the callers, well he's still in range of the guy that's shooting. Well, it absolutely works. But it's not until I started focusing and paying attention, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why are they hanging up. If the bull was 400 yards away from me when I first started calling, and he made up 320 yards and then stopped at 80, well, it's not because I wasn't calling correctly. Well, he just came 320 yards. Of course I was calling correctly. He responded. If the wind is in my face, well, he didn't smell me. If I've got good camouflage on and I didn't move, well, he didn't see me. What in the world? Why is he hanging up? Well, the most obvious answer is, well, he got to a point where he should be able to see that animal calling. Yes. And so if we start to pay attention to say, okay, where is that animal going to stop? How is that animal going to move across the landscape? In my seminars, I would put it in terms of how we ourselves, how we walk through our own houses, all right, or our own home. If we're sitting down in the living room on the couch watching the ball game or something, and our spouse or our kids call to us and need our assistance in the back bedroom, well, we don't go to the garage looking for them, right? I mean, we know what our house is and the layout of our house, and we know where that vocalization, where they called to us from. So most of us are going to get up out of our couch, we're going to walk across the room, up the stairs, around the corner, down the hallway, and we're going to go to the room that they're talking from. And most people get that concept. They're like, okay, well, yeah, the bedding area on a mountain is their bedroom, and that meadow down below is the feeding area, and the elk trail that goes up that ridge, that's their hallway. Most people get that concept. But where I take it a step further with the doorway principle is saying, okay, let's go from there. Let's think about what you and I do. If we get up out of our chair and we go up the stairs, around the corner, down the hall, and we get to the bedroom where we think our wives are calling to us from, what do we do? If you think about it, most of the time, and most of these things happen almost instantaneously in our brain, we get to the doorway of that room, and we instantly go visual, and it happens in milliseconds. If we get to the doorway of that room and our spouse is standing where we can see them, we instantly see, we recognize, and if they're doing something, we instantly go, oh, there you are, that's what you're doing, you must need help, and we continue on into that room and we go and we engage them. But say we get to the doorway of that room and we step in and they're nowhere to be seen. Do we, either walk into the room and we just circle the room around and around and try to find them? Or do most of us pause, vocalize, say, where are you? And then wait for a response. And then maybe they're in the closet and they say, oh, can you come in here in the closet? Oh, okay. I can't see you in the closet, but I hear you in the closet. So now I'm going to move through this room. I'm going to move through the doorway. I'm going to move across the room, and I'm going to go to the doorway of the closet, and then I'm going to reevaluate from there. If you think about it, most of us do that. We pause at that point where we think we should be able to see whoever's vocalizing, to us, and if we don't see them, we pause and we either vocalize, we pause, we wait, and we try to figure out what's going on. Elk are no different. The only thing that we need to do is flip how we assess our setups. And the one thing that I tell people is, most of us, bull bugles a long way away, we call, he responds, we make up distance, he makes up distance, and at some point, it's going to be close enough to where we need to get set up. Most of the time, we fall back on ourselves and we say, okay, where do I need to set up so I have, the most shooting lanes? Or where do I need to set up to where I can see him approaching? Or whatever. We assess what we need in order for us to be able to make that shot, or for our camo to blend in, or for us to get as much cover to help, hide us when we draw our bow. We think about what we need first, and then we hope the elk comes all the way through and gives us a shot opportunity. Unfortunately, most of us don't stop to think, okay, that elk is walking through his house. Where is the doorway to the room, quote unquote, that I am calling from? Where is he going to naturally stop? If we stop and take 2 seconds, and it takes a little practice, but you'll get it. If we take 2 seconds and assess what's around us, where the bull is coming from, how he's coming, and what he's walking through, if we take 2 seconds and go, where is the natural opening where he is going to stop to look into this area, if we identify that first, then make sure we get set up within effective range of that location or that area, it absolutely blows your success rate out of the water. I mean, it just absolutely, your success will go up exponentially, because now, not only is that elk going to walk right to where you think he's going to walk, not only is he, now you're set up to where you have a clear shot opportunity at that, but more importantly, you don't have to make any sort of vocalization to stop the bull. A lot of other, people say all the time that, some of the problems they've had is, that animal's walking through and walking, and they try to stop him, and either can't stop him and he walks right through the shooting lane and he's gone, or when they make a vocalization, they try to stop him and he spooks a little bit and he shifts and turns or moves, and now he's out of position or he's at a bad angle, and now he's looking straight right through them, and now they can't draw their bow, they can't get a shot, and the setup's blown. If you set up within range of that doorway, you don't have to say anything, because he's naturally going to pause there. It's a beautiful thing. Once you start looking at it from the doorway principle, your setups, that is, I think, the number one issue that most people have, with their success each year, is just making sure their setups are correctly, and that's what that doorway principle talks about.
That's awesome stuff. And Chris, give me an example of, say, what are the majority of the doorways that you see? Give me kind of a, is it a meadow? What is it that you look for in that scenario?
90% of the time, it's a transition between cover. So, you like you said, a meadow. If you know the elk are coming out and feeding in a meadow, say they're going from thick, dark timber out into a meadow. Well, the doorway itself very well could be the edge of the meadow. If the timber is so thick and dark, they might have to literally walk out, poke their head out of the timber, and look into that meadow to be able to see where something is. Or you might have, they might be in that thick bedding area, that thick, nasty, dark green timber, but then there's an aspen stand. And that transition between the dark timber and that aspen stand, or an aspen stand into an open meadow, it's that transition point. Most of the time, for me, I've seen it's just that transition between the type of cover, how dense and thick it is. Sometimes it is terrain. Sometimes they'll come up and they'll poke, maybe you have a bench, and either they're below the bench, they're above the bench, or whatever. They come up and they'll stand right on the edge of the bench and they'll look over. Or they'll come up to it and they'll just peek up over the top, or over a saddle. Sometimes it's terrain, but generally speaking, it is at that transition point where they can't see from, they can't see in from where they're coming from, and it's that point where they can step out, and now they have visual clarity to be able to see where you're coming from. Sometimes the doorway is, 10 yards. I mean, it's a very short, tiny, defined little point on the map. Other times, like, you're talking, hunting some of these big, well, for you down in Arizona, sometimes these big open stands of ponderosa pine, or for some of us that hunt big stands of aspen, sometimes they can look 200 yards out across that open country. If that's the case, they could stand 200 yards away. Well, now I've got to try to figure out, okay, how can I position myself to where maybe I've got some thick, nasty stuff behind me. Maybe I have a clump of thick garbage blowdowns or just a patch of timber or something, some sort of feature that is going to block his ability to see beyond it in order to get him to come across that. But it's usually that transition zone from one cover type or one cover density to another.
Do you think having good setups and being able to recognize the doorway is more important or equally important as sounding really good with your calls?
To be honest, as much as I talk about calling and effective calling, I will say your setup is more important. And the only reason why I say that is we've all been there, to where either A, we've got a buddy that just can't call to save his life and just sounds horrible, but yet somehow he or she's successful. But more importantly than that is you're dealing with testosterone. You're dealing with an animal that's ramped up and starting to get in that breeding cycle, that breeding urge. You've got younger animals, you've got older animals. Sometimes that testosterone it's crazy what they will do and what they'll respond to. And there's some animals that just sound horrid anyway. So even if you're not the best caller, as long as you've got the intent right and you're calling from the right area, again, there's another example I give, and we can talk about it here in a minute if you want to, about, why am I saying what I'm saying and the sentences I'm building. As long as you're in the right area where calling makes sense, sometimes those bulls, especially the younger bulls, they don't care. They hear something, they're just going to come running in, because one of the things I talk about is, you never make an elk do anything except maybe run away. All you can do is put in their mind what maybe they ought to do or what's in their best interest to do at the time. And when we're dealing with bulls ramped up on testosterone, you mentioned the see you first, hear you second, smell you third principle. The see you first, visual communication, body language is crucial for elk. And so it is in their best interest to be the first one on scene to make visual contact with, say, a cow that's vocalizing. And if a bull wants that cow and there are other bulls in the area, sometimes the first bull on scene is the one that has the best opportunity to take that cow and pull him into her harem or his harem. So you can be a bad caller and still see success if you get your setups correct. Because the flip side of that is equally, well, I guess not true. You can be the best caller in the world, but if you don't have your setups right, you won't be successful. You just won't.
Yeah, that's what you're saying there is really, nobody else is saying that, and that's I want to expose that, because I think that's such a fundamental thing that, people focus so much on trying to sound good, but like you say, they may sound good and they may be saying the right things, but they're saying it from the wrong position, such as you're in that scenario where your wife's calling you from down the hall, in the room, whatever, up the stairs, and you're on the couch and you may be answering her, what do you need, what do you need? Well, you're not going to have that interaction because she's not going to tell you what she needs from 3 rooms away. She wants you to be, right there close to say, I'm trying to hang this picture. Will you grab the thing, get in?
I need your help. Come here.
Right.
Okay. Right. All right. Well, I'm telling you, Jay, that's the thing, is I would much rather deal with 10 good, effective, efficient hunters in the same valley that I'm dealing with than 1 or 2 idiot hunters. If you're a good, if you understand these things and you're able to implement them, then you can get in and out and surgically engage those elk and slip right back out without ever disturbing them. Or you just get in there, you fill your tag, and then you're out. Rather than just chase, bump, spook, and then all of a sudden the whole valley's gone. You're done.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm with you, man.
Awesome stuff. Chris, in knowing your elk module, your strategies in action, I think, are pretty awesome because you actually set up certain scenarios. And I guess I need to make the listeners aware, inside the elk module, you have, elk gallery, which has all the bull elk, cow elk vocalization, the glossary. You can actually see the elk doing that, sound. But then you have the strategies in action. Talk to me a little bit about why and how you formulated the strategies in action. And I assume that it's because you wanted to be able to take people from hearing all of that and seeing those sounds and hearing those sounds to actually implementing them, and then you walk people through in actual calling situations of, this is what the bull's doing, this is what I need to do now, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so the listener has a visual of what we're talking about, when you go in the elk module, I have it split out with what I call foundation principle. Imagine a pyramid. In your mind, think of a pyramid that has different levels. You remember that old food pyramid that we all growing up? You have the grains at the bottom, and then sweets are at the top. Well, imagine that food pyramid. All right. The foundation principles are a series of videos that are the foundation of just calling and understanding what you're doing. So elk behavior, cow elk vocalizations and communication, bull elk vocalization and communication, those in understanding cow calls and understanding bugles and bugle, all that stuff is the foundation principles. Once you see that, you go, okay, now I understand. Then, like you said, you got the gallery, where now it's what I kind of label it as that recognition. So we move up on that pyramid a little bit, to where now the gallery just shows just raw video footage of elk doing what elk are doing, not a hunting situation. There's no hunting whatsoever. It's just me or Kelly or someone just videoing elk, doing what elk are doing, no interaction by humans whatsoever. It's elk, period. Done. Well, that allows you to kind of recognize and see what it is that we just talked about in the foundation principles. Well, the next step, if we go up on the strategies in action, the strategies in action videos, we go the next step up on that pyramid. You're absolutely right. We talk about the foundation. Okay, here are the meat and potatoes, nuts and bolts of what we're talking about. Okay, you went and you looked in the gallery and you can see, and now you recognize what the elk are doing. Okay, the strategies in action now is saying, okay, well, let's take that. Now let's put it in play. Let's go out into the field and let's do it. We're going to use the doorway principle. We're going to use the see you first, hear you second, smell you third. We're going to use it. I break out some of my in the Elk Hunter Strategy app. It's a application kind of function that we created that allows you to go through and play through different scenarios and learn about different scenarios. Well, in there I talk about a passive strategy, targeted strategy, or aggressive strategies. How do you want to go and engage these animals? Do you want to do it very passively? Do you want to do it targeted where you're going right at them and very purposefully? Or is it a situation where you need to be very aggressive and let's use an aggressive strategy? Well, in the strategies in action, it's just, okay, we're in the field, we're in September or early October, we're calling animals and we're going to put all these things in play and let's see how it unfolds. And some of the videos are me just going out there and calling and we see what happens. Others, though, and this I think is important to show kind of the fact that what I'm talking about has some legitimacy in the fact that, some of these videos I'll say, okay, here we are. This is what the situation is. And before I even make one vocalization or one call, I say, this is the strategy I'm going to use. This is why I'm going to use it. And bam, I do. And we either call an animal right straight to the camera, or we don't, and I talk about why. So that's what the strategies in action video series does, and that's what I'm working on now. I've got a pile of other ones that from last year that I'm putting in place. Some of them are active hunts. Some of the hunts that I have done and been on and videoed, and maybe we kill an elk, or maybe I don't kill an elk, but they're an actual hunt. Other ones are just strictly me going out in the woods calling with a video camera and nothing else.
Yeah, and let me ask you a question. You've spent some time in Arizona, and you've spent some time hunting other states. My question would be, let's compare, let's say, Colorado and Arizona. For the listeners out there, how would you compare calling elk in Colorado did you notice any differences in calling elk in Arizona?
Well, aside from the fact that, in some of the areas that I was in Arizona they're managed more for that trophy management. So you've got way more bulls. Your bull to cow ratio is much, much, much higher than in some of the areas that I was down there in Arizona than where maybe some of the over-the-counter areas that I've hunted in Colorado. In Arizona there, you correct me, I'm just going to take a stab. What are you dealing with, 50, 60 bulls per 100 cows?
Yeah, I think it depends on the unit, but
sure,
most of the units that you were in, 9 and 23, are the 40. They try and manage for, I believe, 40 to 50 bulls per cow.
There you go. So some of our over-the-counter areas in Colorado that I hunt, literally we might be 15 to 25 bulls. So you've got fewer bulls to deal with.
And we're talking, just to be clear, 15 to 20 per 100, yes. And I was saying 40 to 50 per 100.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
No, good clarification. So right there, we're dealing with fewer bulls as far as the population goes, number one. Number two, also age structure. In Colorado, in many areas, you're dealing with a much younger age structure of bulls. But to be honest, I've had the pleasure of hunting Wyoming, Colorado, and now in Wyoming, it was not a trophy managed unit. However, I was very fortunate to be behind a gigantic private ranch. So we were the only people. When I say miles, I mean miles. So we were in the middle of nowhere. So the bulls up there were just like what I saw down in Arizona. I have hunted limited draw units in Colorado from very, very trophy-oriented units up in the northwest part of Colorado. They are the same up there as they are where I was hunting last year in the center part of the state. It's a 4-point unit, so it's not really a quote-unquote trophy unit, but it just has a higher quality. I've hunted New Mexico on private land on a piece of ground that is managed for elk, and the same thing goes. So the only difference, I've always said elk are elk are elk. Elk behavior is elk behavior. Now, we might have there might be a discussion on, is the behavior of a Roosevelt elk different than the behavior of a Rocky Mountain elk? That might be a conversation. But when we're talking about Rocky Mountain elk behavior is elk behavior. Elk vocalizations are elk vocalizations. The only thing that I see that is different is how those animals react to and interact with the habitat and the pressure that they deal with on a daily basis. So in some of these over-the-counter units where I am in Colorado, they're not as vocal. They just don't get rip-roaring cranking like you see in some of these, trophy-managed areas. But they respond exactly the same. When they do a contact bugle, it means the exact same thing, whether you're talking about New Mexico, Arizona, Wyoming, doesn't matter. I take a step back. When I say contact bugle, sometimes people call that a location bugle. But regardless, if they're going to bugle that way, it means exactly the same thing across the board. When a cow does a loss mew or an assembly mew, it means the exact same thing. And because of that, you can expect the same sort of reaction, and that everybody's going to understand it. So there really is no difference. And I hope that comes out and it comes across in the strategies and action videos, because, some of the two latest videos that I have up there are active hunts. They are from Colorado. They're on over-the-counter areas. That's where other people are hunting. And I do exactly what I do in all the other videos, and I show you the exact same result.
Yeah, and it's good stuff. I can attest. I haven't seen the two new ones, but the strategies in action are awesome. In your opinion, if you could pick one mistake that you think people make while elk calling / elk hunting, the single biggest mistake, what would it be?
if we're talking specifically with calling
with an application of calling while elk hunting.
Yes. It is going to be a very strong toss-up between just bugling bugling way too much and too aggressively for no reasonable purpose, or just throwing way too many cow calls out there. Just all sorts of people say, I want to sound like an elk, and in their mind that means just making all sorts of sounds and just throwing them all over the place. Just going nuts. It's like, okay, what? Again, now I'm not saying that's not going to be successful, because there are some people that have success with it. But when you look across the landscape and say, okay, on average, what's their percent success on, if we say I have 10 encounters with a bull or 10 elk, what's my percentage in calling those animals in? A lot of times the people that don't understand, in my opinion, if they don't understand why they are doing what they're doing and what they're doing, they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and hoping to see what sticks. I think that right there ends up costing people more than, other than just calling, I think that is the one, or those things that cost the people the most.
Yeah, and I really agree with you. It's kind of like, a good analogy would be like if you had your turkey box call in your hand and you were going to go out and turkey hunt, and you have learned to yelp on the box, you've learned to cluck on the box, you've learned to purr on the box, you've learned to gobble on the box. And it would be as if you went out there and you sat down by your tree and you heard a bird gobble and you went yelp, 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 you yelped, you went put, 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 you clucked, you went you purred, and then you gobbled on the same box. I mean, yes, those are all sounds that turkeys make, but you are making them simultaneously right behind each other, and that's not natural. And I think, for me, one of the biggest mistakes I think people make, specifically talking about Arizona, is they like to bugle, they like to get the elk to answer, and then they like to continue into the elk still bugling.
Yeah.
And what I find is most of the bulls in Arizona, reach, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, even older, and they've seen that program of the hunter bugling, I haven't heard the bull in a while, let's bugle again, and then let's move another 50 yards and let's bugle again, and it just doesn't work. That does not work.
And the thing is, it's and I'm not going to say, Arizona, you and I have talked about this, some areas, well, let's use your example. We talked last year about you had an opportunity, you've always hunted, you guide in Arizona, but you had an opportunity last year to hunt Montana. And in Arizona, we've talked about the fact that they just don't seem to respond to bugles like they do with cow calls. Whereas you went to Montana, and my gosh, cow call, big deal. You throw a bugle at them, and they just come unglued.
Oh, it was unbelievable after a couple of days. I sweet-talked a few bulls, but Jason, he's like, you have a bugle? And I said, yeah, it's back at camp. He goes, let's bring it tomorrow. About, halfway into the first morning, he's like, do you have that bugle? And I said, yeah. And he goes, give it to me. And he takes it out, and he rips out a bugle. Then he starts just stomping on this tree. And I'm not talking about, like, raking a tree. I'm talking about, like, Jason Harrison got in a fight with this tree. And, he's bugling, and he's jumping up and down, and he's breaking branches and going crazy. And I'm thinking, if you did this in Arizona, the elk would laugh at you, but the reality is they probably wouldn't. And he goes crazy, and all of a sudden, 5 or 6 or 7 bulls all around us just light up, and they started coming our way.
Yeah.
And so I learned a good lesson there in that, sometimes what works at your home turf doesn't, might not work, or you might find things that work better. And, you know, I definitely learned that bugling in Montana is definitely a way to get those bulls really fired up.
Well, and the point being, and this is something that I talk about in all my stuff, and why I set up my strategies the way I do, is you nailed it. Not all areas are created equal. It's not that bugling doesn't work, or it's not that bugling works. Of course, it's a tool. You're calling, and I think people need to realize this, or I wish more people realize this. The calling that you're doing is nothing more than a tool. Dan Evans has killed more big bulls than I know of anybody else, and I don't think he hardly calls at all. He stalks them like a mule deer, and he smokes some great big bulls. Whereas you've got folks like Corey Jacobson, he loves to bugle. You just did their podcast with him, and he talks about that's what he wants to do. He wants to find the bull that wants to come to a bugle. That's what his passion is, and so that's what he does. And those are two ends of the spectrum. But what people need to realize is that isn't the end-all, be-all. You don't have to just pick one, and you know, there's an old adage, to the person who has only a hammer, the entire world ends up looking like a nail. Okay? So not every tool is going to fit every situation. And so, you know, I have a perfect example. Is in Colorado, over-the-counter unit. Literally, it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and all of a sudden I'm up next to this bedding area, up in the dark timber, up towards timberline, and these two bulls start cutting loose. And as soon as I hear them bugle, I'm like, they're dead. I mean, one of these is dead. I mean, these are callable. Done. So sure enough, I sneak my way in, get set up, boom, hit him with a targeted strategy, and I mean, I put one right smack dab in my lap, boom, shoot him, he goes down, yay, I filled my tag. Well, meanwhile, the second bull is losing his mind that now his buddy isn't anywhere around.
He's not answering.
No, he's not. And now I stopped calling. I don't need to call anymore because I'm quartering up my elk. Well, this elk is just going nuts, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna have some fun with this thing. And so every now and then I throw him a cow call, or just a mew or whatever. And this thing would. So he's circling me in the dark timber. Okay, it just screaming his head off. Well, about halfway through, and I'm quartering this elk. Okay, at some point I know this bull smelled me. Well, about halfway through me quartering this elk, I can hear a hunter coming up the ridge, and he's bugling. And as he gets caught, he's laying it out. He's just doing, beautiful competition style bugle. Well, every time he bugles, the bull would shut up and just stand there and be silent, and then the guy would continue coming. So all of a sudden, here we get this situation where the hunter bugles, the bull shuts up. The bull goes silent for 5 to 10 minutes, and then there's nothing going on in the woods anywhere. All of a sudden, the bull starts up again. He bugles a couple more times. He gets cranked up, and all of a sudden, the hunter bugles at him again. Bull shuts up. And I'm literally, for like 10, 15 minutes, he's going back and forth. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You're bugling at this bull. Just throw him a cow call, and he's going to run over you. And I finally did. I just, at the top of my voice, I just yelled across the woods. I was like, use a cow call! Bull bugles at me. I was like, if you get stuck on doing the same thing over and over again and not realizing that there are other tools in the toolbox, you're going to limit yourself. If you go to Arizona, or I don't care where you are, if you go to an area where the elk generally are responding to cow calls, you should be able to use cow calls and use them effectively and know what you're saying. Whereas, you might throw out all these cow calls in the world and not get a response, but now you have a bugle with you. If you can transition and say, okay, well, they didn't want a cow call. I know what I'm doing with my bugle. I start using a bugle. Boom. You use the tool that is going to fit the task at hand. And I think that's, some of these people that just go in the woods and say, I want to sound like an elk. Well, I've got video footage of Rocky Mountain National Park. I can park you in the middle of a herd of 300 elk. The only thing you're going to hear are the magpies out there squawking. I mean, they're dead silent. Just because there's a lot of elk doesn't mean there's a lot of sound. So I don't know. I think for calling purposes, back to your original question, I think if you're just throwing stuff at the wall hoping to see what sticks, yes, you can be successful if you find the right bull that wants to play your game. But in some of the areas, at least that I know that I hunt, you might be walking by 1, 2, 3, a half dozen elk in the woods that you never even know they're there, that are willing to work a call, but just not the ones that you're throwing at them.
Sure. And I think that's where the elk module, Row Hunting Resources, really comes in, and it's worth its weight in gold. I want to commend you on the job you've done with it. It's unlike any resource I've seen. And I want to thank you for being on today, but I want to give you a chance to let people know where they can find you,
Sure.
How they can find you. And I just appreciate you being on with us today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you. No, I always enjoy talking with you. But no, if people want to check it out, like I said, it's kind of like basically what you do is you subscribe and you kind of get like a library card. So, it gives you access, and then everything that's in there is open for you to look at. And like I said, I'm building more stuff right now, and I'm constantly adding it. So, yeah, I like it. I'm proud of it, but it's a work in progress, and I'm still not satisfied with all the stuff that I could have in there, and I'm working on that. So, but if people do want to check it out, it's just rowhuntingresources.com. It's ROE huntingresources.com. And if you go to the main page there, there's a place where you says sign up, and you can, for the elk module, there's two different ways that you can access the elk information. Either just sign up for the elk module itself, which just opens up the elk library, and you can have it basically gives you a 3-month pass to the elk library, or you can get the full annual subscription, so it's 365 days from when you sign up, and it opens up everything. So everything's there for you to peruse through. But either way, you can just sign up. And
when you say everything, not to interrupt you, but when you say everything, what you mean then is the full turkey module, sure, which goes through all of the turkey vocalizations and all of the turkey behaviors,
yep,
and the deer module, which goes through all of the whitetail deer behaviors and all the cycles of the rut and the noises they make and the behavioral patterns and such.
Yeah, and that's a good clarification. Yeah, and by far, the biggest module is our elk. That is where I started. That is my passion. That is what I focus on. Turkey, I've got some stuff in there, and then deer is just, there's a few things in there, deer, and I'm going to do some more with some of the habitat stuff that we do here in Kansas. But regardless, the elk module is by far the largest one, and the one that I add the most to. So, and like I did for you guys with the turkey one, anybody that listens to this podcast and wants to sign up, if they go, there's a spot, if you click to sign up, there's a spot lower down on the information page that says if there's a coupon code or discount or whatever. If they type in J. Scott Podcast, all one word, just J. Scott Podcast, it'll take 20% off. So,
okay, and the elk module is how much, Chris?
$24 or 20. It says essentially $25. So with your discount, it's $20 for the 3 months, or the full annual subscription is $50. It'll be $40 for anybody that's listening for this.
And just so the listeners understand, I mean, this isn't like 2 or 3 videos. I mean, this is like 30 or 40 videos, and maybe more, specifically, having elk demonstrate the mew, the lost mew, the alarm bark, the aggravated whine, the frustrated whine. I mean, all these different sounds, and bulls chuckling, glunks, huffs, alarm barks,
Yeah.
So, you, in your humbleness, you weren't exactly spelling out. I mean, we're talking a lot, like hours and hours worth of resource here that you can learn. And so I just wanted to be clear on that because, this elk module is phenomenal. And, from the very first time I went on it years ago, I've loved it, and I appreciate you doing it. And I appreciate you offering that discount to the listeners, and appreciate having you on. They can also find you at rowhuntingresources.com, correct, and on Facebook?
Well, yeah, any of, whether it's our website, Facebook, it's just Row Hunting Resources. We've got a YouTube channel where I've got a pile of other videos on there, and that's just, again, Row Hunting Resources YouTube channel. Instagram. Yeah, if you type in Row Hunting Resources in any of your most of your social media stuff or our website, it's going to come to us. So.
Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we're fortunate to have Chris Rowe of Row Hunting Resources again on the podcast, and I had so much great feedback from the podcast episode that Chris and I did a while back that I thought I would have him on again. He brings a lot of expertise to the table, and I'm proud to have him on again. Chris, how you doing?
Doing all right, my friend. How are you?
Oh, doing just fine. We're getting closer and closer to elk season. Every day that goes by is another one. We're getting closer, so I'm getting excited.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's awesome. Chris, I know you've just recently uploaded a video to YouTube and basically talks about a topic we briefly talked about in the last episode about why it matters, meaning the actual sounds and calls you make. You believe that it does matter, when you use those and what sounds you're making. Talk to me a little bit about that video that you just uploaded on YouTube.
Well, like you said, from our last discussion, some people listened to it, and I got a lot of feedback from it as well. There's two schools of thought, and in general, they are, there's a camp of folks that believe that it really does not matter what you're saying. So if I go out in the woods or in the hills or whatever, and I give a cow call, so let's just say I give a lost mew. People use the terminology lost mew. All right, so I give a lost mew. Well, does it really matter if I know exactly what that is meaning, or is it more important to just be really good with my calling and give quality sounds and use quality calls and just put a lot of feeling and emotion into your calling, all right? So there's the camp that says it doesn't really matter. You just want to sound good, and you want to sound like you have a lot of emotion, and you're, really pleading in your calling.
And I think, before you go into the next one, I think I would fall into the category of I haven't thought about it enough to know why it matters or to think about why it matters. And you really opened the door on our last conversation. I've always felt like I have great sounds, but to be honest with you, a lot of times I don't even know what sound I'm making. I'm just making a good sound. I'm kind of in the middle because I am of a belief that it really does matter. And going through the elk module on Row Hunting Resources, after our conversation, it really started, making me want to know more and learn more about what actual sounds to make, because I feel like I can make good sounds. I just need to know when to make them.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it with something you just mentioned, in the fact that there are a lot of successful elk hunters out there, and whether you're a calling instructor or just your caller or you're an elk hunter or whatever, or a guide or outfitter or whatever, there are some just phenomenally successful folks out there that they don't know what it is that they're saying. They've never put any stock in it. They don't care. They just say, I sound good and I'm successful, so that's really all that matters. Well, and again, this is a controversial topic. I mean, it really is. You can get some people that are just vehement about, no, it doesn't. You're just talking voodoo. But the reason why I dove into it with this video is because when I sit and have a conversation with folks and I provide some, whether it's biological background or information to it, or even if I just put it in context with you and I and how we are in our conversations and communication, like you said, it really opens people's eyes to going, well, wait a minute, no, maybe it does matter. Now, granted, I know that there's other people out there that talk about, vocalizations and communication and what certain things mean. And I even say right in the video, listen, I know that there's other people out there that say that talk about this stuff, and quite honestly, I understand, some folks look at it and say, oh, I don't agree with that. Well, I don't agree with a lot of what some of these other folks are talking about either. I understand that, but like we talked about in the last one, that's why I have the video of the elk doing what I'm talking about in the elk module. It's not me flapping my gums. It's the elk themselves doing it. You can see their body language. You can hear them. You can see the outcome of that interaction. But for me, absolutely it matters. If you want to be more successful, yes, it absolutely matters.
And from your background of being a wildlife biologist, I mean, you are an avid archery elk hunter, and you are an avid elk caller. You do lots of seminars all over the Southwest. But what I find interesting about the elk module is the fact that it seems that you bring it all the way back full circle to the biology aspect of, here is a cow making an assembly mew. This is what it sounds like. And it's like, oh, now I kind of understand. I hear that all the time, but in her cadence and in her tone, this is what she's inferring, when a lot of people, including myself, just hear a cow call and go, that's a cow calling.
Yeah.
You are taking it a whole step and whole different level of trying to understand the actual communications, because within those communications, the tone and the sound of every cow is going to be different, but maybe the number of times she calls, or that's what intrigues me.
Structure.
It's structure. It's not just, you and I could sit there and you could say, do it like this 3 times, and I'm going to sound different than you, but we could both achieve the same results. Yes. Because all cows sound different.
Yes, and that's it. The structure of the vocalization. I talk about the long mew. There's so many things you just said that had my brain racing. So, for instance, like the lost mew. If we talk about the lost mew, and you hold or you emphasize that high note and you come off on the low note, very quickly. It does not matter if you're very, very super, super high, or you're a medium pitch, or you're kind of a lower pitch. If you're holding the higher note and then falling, that structure of that vocalization is going to relay a certain meaning. Or if we talk about the assembly mew, which is the mirror opposite of that, you're talking very, very short on the high note, that you drag out that low note, all right? That structure of the vocalization, it doesn't matter if I'm using mouth diaphragm doesn't really lend itself to a assembly mew, but if I'm using, say, an open reed style call, I can do it on a single reed, I can do it on a double reed, I can do it with a tone converter, I can do it muffled in my hand. It doesn't matter what it ultimately sounds like is from a standpoint of sound quality or pitch or anything like that, but if the structure is the same, then that vocalization is going to mean the same. And what really got my brain racing is you talk about bringing it full circle. And I talk about that in this YouTube video. If folks want to check it out, they can either go to our YouTube channel, and it'll be right there at the top, and that's just Row Hunting Resources in the YouTube channel. But it's Mastering Your Elk Calling. Doesn't really matter if you know what you're saying. And so in there, I talk about that exact fact of bringing it full circle, and for me, what that means is there are a lot of folks that either take all of their learning or base all of their conclusions on what they're hearing and what they see with elk, all from essentially September. They go elk hunting, they engage elk, they hear things, they see things, and that's how they make their conclusion. Well, in a bunch of my different videos, I talk about, correlation is not necessarily causation. Just because you see something happen or hear something happen at a certain time does not mean two things are related. So,
but it's very easy, I think, to hear it and see a reaction and go, that's what caused this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I talk about that in depth in, I've got you've watched it, the series Understanding Bull Vocalizations and Communication, when I talk about the glunk. The glunk, yes. The glunk, I think, is probably the most misunderstood vocalization that a bull elk can do, and it really was not until Kelly and I sat, and Kelly's the one that really, I think, she discovered it, really teased it out. we sat there. We've got I don't know how many hours of video, and you just, bulls glunk, 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 glunking. And it wasn't until she was going through them, she was like, wait a minute. I think it means this. And we started looking at it, and I'm like, what? Yeah. And so we started going back through and pulling all of our video and trying to, and we talk about, you can never prove a behavioral theory or a vocalization theory to be correct. The only thing you can do is disprove it. All right. And I talk about that in depth on some of the videos. But regardless, we went back through and tried to disprove all the other things that we had ever heard or believed about a glunk, and we started just knocking them out of the water. We're like, nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it, because there were so many inconsistencies. But when it all boiled down to it, we realized, wait a minute, no, it's very, very simple. But it still relates to all these other things, but it doesn't necessarily mean, glunk people say, oh, it attracts cows. Oh, it's for keeping cows. Oh, it's for, asserting dominance. Oh, it's for imprinting on cows. Nope. It means stay. It means stay. And we can sit there and I can show you that repeatedly, and it works every single time. And so, yes, what you're saying is when you go out in the field and you see, I make a call, a bull responds, and he runs me over. Well, it's easy to say, oh, okay, well, that call must mean this, and that's what he wanted.
It's kind of like fishing, and you throw a cast out with one fly, and you get a fish, you're like, okay, that's what they want. Well, maybe that's what just that one wanted.
There you go.
It doesn't necessarily mean that's what every fish wants.
There you go. And so when you said full circle, what it means to me is there are so many variables in September. When you throw testosterone and raging estrogen in the cows, going crazy with those reproductive hormones going on, that throws such a wild card in the mix. I mean, you've got, the differences in the cows, you got difference in the bulls, you have sex ratio, age class, hunter pressure, environmental factors. There's so many variables that you cannot control or even remotely account for. What I did is I said, okay, fine, I'm going to eliminate all that. Skip September. I'm going to ignore end of August. I'm going to ignore September, and I'm going to ignore October. What do elk do in December? What do they do in January? What do they do in March, June, July? What are they doing the entire rest of the year? And can we tease out what's going on then? At those times of year, you don't have hunting pressure. The elk are a lot more relaxed. You have there's no, reproductive hormones going, that are going to throw anything. When you go kind of to that off season, if you will, and start really spending time teasing out with video and audio, just start teasing out vocalizations and communication, then you start to see that, wait a minute, there are set vocalizations that mean very, very specific things that always, always, always have the exact same expectation, result, whether it elicits a response or whether it elicits an action from another animal. They are consistent. Well, if they're consistent in November, as they are in January, as they are in July, then why wouldn't they be consistent in September? And now you can go from the point of, I don't really, I throw something out there in this case, and a bull runs me over. I go to the next ridge, I do the exact same call, and not only do I get ignored, the elk just turn around and leave and walk away.
So that's why it matters.
And I'll even go beyond that from a standpoint, okay, well, maybe we don't like what, you make a vocalization, they didn't like what they heard, and I talk about, they didn't like what you were selling. I'll give an example of a guy in a produce department of a grocery store. If somebody jumps up on their produce stand and starts yelling pencils and automobiles and bootlaces and winter jackets, it makes sense that we all understand that those words don't go together and they don't make sense. But more importantly, does it change our behavior? And so in some cases, we go out into the field, and this is, I think, really especially true when we're dealing with over-the-counter units on heavily hunted public ground where there's a lot of people calling. And the elk are generally a little bit more wary anyway. And you've got what we talked about before, where you got those bull say down in your area where you got so many stinking bulls that, I mean, heck, you're almost tripping over bulls in some cases, whereas in some of the areas in whether it's Idaho, Colorado, New Mexico, wherever, Wyoming, where you've got some of these other units where you might have 10 bulls per 100 cows or 15 bulls per 100 cows. You don't have that many bulls out there. So when you're out there and you start calling, yes, we're trying to get them to do what we want them to do with our vocalizations. We want to be attractive. We want to get them to come in. But if we vocalize with something and they just don't like what we're saying, well, if they don't like what we're saying simply because they're not interested in it. So, for instance, if I gave them a vocalization and that vocalization was dead on accurate within the context of where I was calling from and the context of what I was saying to that animal, and that animal is like, no, I'm not interested in coming over to you, well, that's fine, but if it all makes sense, then the animal just goes back to doing whatever it is he's doing, and he just continues on his way. He does not change his behavior, and I can back out, I can regroup, I can come back in and work him that afternoon. If that doesn't work, I can back out, I can come back, I can work him the next morning, and I can figure out what strategy is needed to get that animal to work, but I don't change his behavior. Whereas some of us go out there and we just start throwing stuff out there and hoping to see kind of what sticks. Well, if the animal does not like what we're selling, that's fine, but if we stand out too badly, or if we call in such a manner to where they're like, wait a minute, that's not right, you can actually not only have that animal not respond favorably to your calling, but in fact, turn and leave, or just absolutely modify their behavior. So now, it didn't work, my calling strategy didn't work on this animal, this morning. So I back out and I leave and I come back that evening and I hope to work that animal again, and nope, he's gone. He's up and over the ridge and he left. Now I've got to go find another elk.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you've totally blown your opportunity.
Yeah.
And not even have the opportunity to go back and re-engage with him. You've screwed the pooch in essence, and he's gone.
Exactly. And it, obviously, and I kind of just, this, this day and age, the fitness, the hunter athlete and the super fitness minded athlete or hunter, a lot of people talk about, having your fitness to the ultimate level, so that way you can go back farther and hunt harder and hunt longer and cover more ground. And well, okay, and quite honestly, I think a lot of that is a symptom of the fact that people are not capitalizing on the animals as they run into them. So they have to run this ridge to that ridge, to that ridge, to that ridge, always looking for the next elk, trying to find another elk that's willing to play their game.
So instead of more efficiently being able to communicate and work the different animals, the mindset is the better shape that I'm in, the more country that I can cover, which means I don't have to be near as efficient and effective with my calling and with my setups, and I'm just going to run them down.
I'm going to run them down, and I'm going to at some point stumble into an elk that is willing to work and do what I want, willing to come to my call. Yes, I truly believe that. It's different. And some people have actually said it.
And so it's different than someone saying, I'm going to live and die by the bugle. This is more of I'm going to just not learn why I need to improve my hunting skill of communicating with the animals and knowing behaviorally what they're doing. I'm going to take that weakness and try and be as in good a shape as I can to just try and run into as many elk as I can, and one of them's going to end up biting.
Yes, and I know, and Jay, I'm telling you right now, I know darn well that what we're talking about right now in our belief structure, or I'm not even going to throw it on you. I'll own it. I'll own it. I mean, I will own it because this is truly what I believe. I see it all the time, and I talk to so many people that, yes, they don't, their toolbox, if you will, of knowledge and skill set and what they can do with their calls is limited. And so literally that is what they are left with is and I do. In the video, I give an example. I'm like, okay, we go into this basin. We're in this long valley. There are 10 elk in this valley. We might not know that to start out, but the fact remains is, yes, there are 10 elk in this valley. Some of us go out there and we just call and we hope that something sticks. And what we're hoping to do is run that valley at some point and hope that we find the one bull in the valley that's willing to play our game. Whereas, if I, from my belief set and what I talk about is, I want to go into that same valley and be able to work every single one of those bulls. If I come to that first bull and I find out, oh, he has cows, so I have to, work him a certain way. Well, now I can. If I go to the next bull and find out, oh, he's off on his own, and he's a mature bull, okay, I can work him. I go to the next bull, oh, it's a younger bull off on his own, he just got ran out from, this other group, he's really call shy, he's a little nervous, well, that's fine, I know how to work him. I can go into that valley and I can work all 10 bulls without having to run that whole stinking system hoping to find that one animal. Because the thing that always, the one common denominator, I guess, people would not still be going to elk calling seminars if people were having extreme success with elk, with what they're getting from elk calling seminars. People are going out in the field each year. They're trying new stuff. They're doing whatever they can do, but they're not getting success with it. And so, especially if you're a beginning hunter, if you're not getting success, and you've got I would have to think that you would agree with this, especially from a fishing standpoint. If you are not seeing success from what you are doing, your confidence level just starts to nosedive. And if you are out in the field, you just hiked in 4 miles with a heavy backpack to get into where you think the elk should be. You're tired, you're sore now, you're into camp, you start hunting, and after a couple days, you're either not finding the elk, or the elk just aren't working, or they're not doing what you want them to do. Your confidence level just starts taking a nosedive to where it's going to be harder for you to get up in the morning and get out of that sleeping bag. It's going to be harder for you to stay out all day if you need to. It's going to be harder to convince yourself, no, I need to stay out here until dark and, maybe hike back to camp in the pitch black. It starts to wear on your psychological wherewithal, if you will. And so, no, if you take the next step to learn, in my opinion, say, I want to know behavior. I want to know what these vocalizations mean, and I want to know how I'm supposed to use, how the elk use them, not how I'm supposed to use them, how the elk use them. Then right from the get-go, you have more confidence, because I've already seen an elk. I've seen 6 videos of elk doing this vocalization, and I've seen 6 results of that vocalization. I know for a fact the elk say this, and I know for a fact this is what they perceive, and this is what they are expecting. So now, not only am I more confident, the likelihood of you actually having a favorable interaction when you do call goes through the roof, to where now your confidence is a lot better, and your effectiveness and your efficiency goes up a lot better as well.
I've got a couple comments to talk about what you're just saying, and one of the reasons why I started this podcast is because of the exact reason you're talking about. I am a student of the game in fishing, in golf, in hunting, in, you break hunting down, turkey hunting, elk hunting, deer hunting, whatever it is. I played golf, played college golf, played in high school, was a student of the game of golf. I've loved fishing ever since I was a little kid. I am a student of the game. A couple comments I would have is, I can't understand logic of some people that will spend, $100 a month on supplements and new gym memberships and, all the different things. While those are great things, they totally neglect and disregard trying to improve one of the main fundamental hunting skills, which is being able to learn a behavior of the animal you're hunting and be able to communicate with that animal. Okay, so I started this podcast because I am a student of every game that I play. I want to know everything that I possibly can. I am an analytical person, but I believe that the more that I can learn, the better off I will be. I am the first one to ask a guide, a fly fishing guide in a boat next to me when we're sitting at the takeout, how was your day? How'd you do? I'm trying to learn. I'm not trying to pick their brain and be a snob, and I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to say, man, I'll just say, I flat between 10 and 2. I struggled. I couldn't figure out what those fish are doing. Some guy says, oh, they're on, BWO emergers, or they're doing this. And I'm like, I didn't, you know. So the reason I started this podcast is I figured that with my analytical mind, and my inquisitive mind and wanting to be a student of the game, that I could have great guests on like yourself, and I could have the conversation to learn myself, but also make it in an engaging, entertaining way, informational way that people could get something out of it. And, that's where, I've elk hunted for a long time, and I would say I am as confident in my elk hunting and elk calling ability as probably anybody else out there, and the results that I've gotten over the years have been, great and very good. But guess what? I learn every day, and that's why when I found Row Hunting Resources elk module, it like opened up a whole new world, because I had spent so much time. I think this year will be 20 years, taking the entire month of September off and listening to elk and videoing elk. But the older I get, the more I understand, the less I know.
Yeah.
Meaning, I have a lot to learn, and I feel like I'm as a proficient elk guide and elk hunter as probably, anyone out there. But one thing that I never really understand is there's a lot of guides and there's a lot of hunters out there that hunt every year, and they don't know how to call. They don't know how to call well, and they don't even try.
Yeah. Keep going. I'm with you.
And so, from talking about the fitness, I've gotten several emails, because in these podcast episodes, I guess I have been critical of those that are, into extreme fitness. One of the things I'd like to say is it's not that I'm against extreme fitness. It's that I'm against, why not spending some of that time learning how to call and communicate with the animals that you're hunting. And I'm not picking on any one particular person. I've just had enough feedback from people that they just don't get it.
Well, and
just because you can run 6 ridges over does not mean you can kill an elk. Now, if you can communicate very well and know what the animal's behavior and what to say at the right time, and run 6 ridges over and, do 10,000 vertical feet in a morning, then you're that much better.
Well,
but it seems they totally disregard one and go full steam in the other, and you go, well, have you practiced your elk calling, or have you learned what those elk are saying? You use the J. Scott, JSO podcast promo code, or J. Scott Outdoors, whatever the promo code is with Row Hunting Resources, you get the elk module for $20.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they'll go spend hundreds on, a new road bike and all this stuff to get in shape, but they won't spend $20. And I'm not saying they don't, because you have a lot of members, but, the logic, I just don't understand.
Because, and Jay, I don't want to shut you down, but I mean, the reason being, I think, is because two things. Number one, if you spend money, you just bought something tangible. I can hold it. I have a new, I've got new camo, I've got new clothes, I've got a new bow, I've got, whatever. I've got something new. It's something tangible. It's something that I've done that I can show that I have done different from last year. And the fitness thing, I think, is very similar in the fact that if I'm taking supplements and I'm running and biking, hiking, and everything else, that yes, I tangibly can feel I'm better. I can tangibly measure the fact that I can hike farther now, and I can run better, and I feel better. So now I can cover more ground. That is a tangible, real thing that you can grasp or at least wrap your head around. The problem is knowledge, not so much. You don't know. You can spend all the time in the world you want trying to gain knowledge, but you do not know if you have that knowledge until you test it. And so it's intangible until the moment of truth. And so if you don't have the confidence, everything up to that point has deteriorated your confidence in calling or your confidence in ability of working animals. You don't have the confidence to actually put the material in play. A couple great examples. One was an Elk Mod member. He subscribed. He had seen one of my seminars. I think it was a seminar guy. He subscribed. In the Elk Mod, I talk about, we talked about the doorway principle, all right? And I talked about the see you first, hear you second, smell you third. Well, he went out in the field, learned all that stuff, but in the back of his mind, he was like, I don't know. And so he did everything absolutely perfect, but then he was like, I second-guessed myself, and I stuck a decoy out. And he stuck the decoy out, but it wasn't by any, it was just kind of a last minute, I'll just throw it here and see if that helps. Well, the elk came right around. The elk did exactly what I said it was going to do, what the behavior said it was going to do. Everything was right smack dab down the line until that bull stepped around and saw that decoy, and the bull stopped and stared at the decoy, just like we talk about. And the bull turned and never gave the guy a shot, only because the bull stopped when he saw the decoy. And the guy wrote, he's like, you know what? Ditch the decoy, work the setup. Now, I'm not poo-pooing decoys. I use them and I still have them, and I talk about that. However, in the wrong situation, it can be a detriment. In this case, the point I'm making is he learned all the information, but he doubted. He was like, I don't know. I don't know, and so he just kind of hedged his bets. And I understand why people doubt, because, again, there are other folks out there talking about stuff, and even you and I, logically, we listen to some of these other folks and we're like, I don't know, that doesn't make any sense. Well, again, like we talk about, that's why I put the elk in, I'm videoing elk doing it, so you're not listening to me. But I'm telling you,
what you're saying is, don't take my word for it, take the elk's word for it.
Yes, exactly. And what you said there with the fitness, I'm in the same boat with you. I'll tell you right now, I am not in shape. I'm not near in shape that I need to be. So I'm not going to criticize those guys that are in shape, because I remember when I was in shape, it made my hunt a heck of a lot more enjoyable. However, not only is it, yes, if you can run 3 ridges and find an elk that's playing your game, that's fine. But another thing that we talk about, or I've talked about before, is the fact that my experience and where the genesis, if you will, the core fundamental start of all of my philosophy came from the fact that I am a solo hunter. I have to call the elk myself, to me, to kill. And then more importantly, I hunt on some have hunted on some very, very tough public ground that was heavily, heavily hunted. And literally, I was in college at the time, and I would leave Friday night, I would get in camp at 11 o'clock at night, or at the trailhead 11 o'clock at night, hike in about 2, 3 in the morning, and then I would have Saturday to hunt and Sunday morning. That's it. And so I had to figure out how to be a lot more effective and a lot more efficient. And what I see today is people not focusing on efficiency, but rather focusing on their physical abilities. Not only are they just running past a lot of elk, but unfortunately, some of these guys, because they just want to run and gun and they want to find an elk that'll play their game, they're just burning through habitat, negatively impacting the elk along the way. And so for guys like me, new hunters, people out there with kids, okay, they cannot go 5 ridges over. They have this ridge. But now you just burned through this ridge and you created such a disturbance that now you just made it tough, or even tougher, for everybody else that's down there. Now, granted, I understand people are like, well, I don't care, I'm going to get my elk, and that's my business. Well, that's fine, but like we talked about last episode, I would much rather deal with 10 guys in the field, in the same valley, that know what they're doing, than 1 or 2 guys that don't. because the impact is that much greater. And I've got to believe for you, as being a guide, when you have some of these people that drew a tag that took them 20 years to draw, I mean, my gosh. I mean, the impact there has got to be, the stress level's got to be huge. Because,
I mean, one of the things, one of the reasons why I only do 14-day hunts, so our archery season in Arizona is 14 days, and the reason that I only do 14-day hunts is I recognize that, one, the tags are hard to come by and they've waited a long time to draw that tag, and two, that they need to make the most of their time and they don't need to be limited by a 7-day hunt. In my opinion, on limited draw hunts, guys that book a 7-day hunt are making a very big mistake, because in Arizona, speaking specifically, you are going to get some hunts that are interrupted by people. You're going to get some hunts that are interrupted by lightning storm or by whatever kind of, downpour rain or what happened, or, something happens and your truck breaks down, or there's going to be outside influences that are going to ruin some sessions of your hunt. So I think that's why it's important to do 14-day hunts and to try and reduce the stress level, knowing that, with that amount of time, you have basically, I call them 28 sessions, a morning and an evening, because I don't hunt much during the day unless it's really peak rut. And it just gives them a little bit of sense of, okay, we can get this done, and, we try and be efficient with all of our setups, with all of our mornings and our evenings. But, yeah, I mean, efficiency, being a student of the game like I am, and learning every single time I go out, and learning from, guys like you and others, I can pick something up and become more efficient by learning. And I think I'm hoping that the younger generation that is getting into the sport, with all of the influences that we have to be, macho and fit, half of that I think is a young man's mentality to, be the fittest guy out there. And that is fantastic. And I would say when I was 22 years old, I might have been in the same category. As I get older, I realize that every year that I get older, I'm going to have to work harder, one, to be in shape, but number two, I realize that being more effective and efficient is paramount. It's more important than being able to go 36 miles in one day. Being able to work that specific elk and be efficient with that elk, the older I get, is more important to me.
Yeah, and I'm kind of sitting here chuckling to myself. For me, I don't want people to think that I'm some just grumpy old man.
Me too.
Because I'm not. It's just it's not. By all means, it's not. I've talked to so many hunters. And, it's not that we're talking about these huge revelatory, these earth-shattering things. Sometimes it's just one little thing that somebody didn't think about and say, again, the doorway principle or the see you first principle, or whether it's the meaning of a certain vocalization or whatnot. It just, people are like, oh, it's the light bulb that goes off. One of your listeners signed up from the last podcast, and I'm not gonna give his name. I'll just read what he said. And he goes, and it's an email, and I spend a lot of time hunting and guiding elk hunters in Arizona. I believe you have some of the best content on the web. It's really cool, and I wish I would have found this about 15 years ago. And that is probably the most common statement I hear.
And that's the revolution that I found, the epiphany of, oh my gosh, nobody else is explaining this in this type of fashion, and so I can agree with his sentiment. I totally agree with that email. I mean, that's the way I felt when I found it.
Whether or not you are a student of, a lover of the game or a student of the game, like you said, and I kind of agree with that. I'm the same way. Whether you're that type of person, or whether you're just starting out, or whether you're just somebody that just is not happy with the level of consistency that they're getting, if you spend a little time working on your efficiency in what you what you're doing, it is going to blow the doors wide open on your success level and your confidence level and your enjoyment out in the field. And quite honestly, well, that just ended at that. I mean, the people, when you sit there and you go, I heard a bull, I can go in and I can call him in. I mean, it's very fun for me to listen to folks that come back and they go, oh my gosh, there's this bull, I did this, I walked in, I gave him that targeted strategy, and boom, put him in my lap. And it wasn't a bull that I wanted, so I went to the next bull. And this is public ground, and then, I went to the next bull, and it was a great 6-bite, boom, we killed that one, and then my buddy killed that one, and oh my gosh, then we had to figure out how to get him out, and that's the type of enjoyment that I really do. I really enjoy hearing that from folks. So I don't want people thinking I'm just a grumpy old man that, I enjoy people being successful, and I think that they can be successful fairly easily if they just tweak a couple of little things that they think or what they know and how they implement some of that knowledge.
Yeah, and I am absolutely right there with you, and I have some phenomenal support, and the listeners are, they support the podcast and support what I'm doing unbelievably. There's a few probably out there that are thinking I'm going to send Jay an email as soon as this is over and tell him, about, you need to be in fit, and I am not arguing that you don't need to be fit. Please understand what Chris and I are both saying is, we're just talking about being more of a student of the game and being more efficient and being able to understand animal behavior and to be able to communicate with the animals. In my mind, being older than I was 20 years ago, I understand, in my opinion, that is more important now. And I wish 20 years ago I would have, been more efficient.
Well, I tell you what, we could even just use this. We've all seen, whether it's a Facebook meme or we've heard people talk about, you'll see some guy with a big upper body, big arms, big chest, and these skinny little chicken legs, and it says, never forget leg day. Never skip leg day. Well, okay, I tell you what, that's fine. Be fitness. Do that. Absolutely be fit. However, don't forget brain day. Don't forget to work that muscle or that gray matter as well. Don't forget to work the brain, because that is going to be, and we joked about it, the fact that, that's fine. You can get to the top of the mountain in record time. You stand on the top of the ridge, and then it's now what? Okay, yeah. You got there. That's fine. Now what? All right. So don't skip brain day.
Meanwhile, the old guy comes sauntering up and finally gets up there and makes 3 calls, and the elk's standing at 10 yards, and he whacks him, and it's like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Or more worse yet, the guy kills it at quarter mile from the trailhead, and he's already back in his truck.
Yeah. Well, that's all great stuff, and to be quite honest with you, I want to talk to you a little bit about the moon phase. Originally, we were going to talk about moon phase and its effect on the rut. And I am of the opinion that the moon phase, from a behavioral standpoint, as it affects the rut, what I can tell you is what I've noticed in full moon situations, it seems as though the elk rut like crazy at night when we're not obviously allowed to hunt them. They go to their beds early, they head to the thick country early, and they are less vocal and such during the day because they've been partying all night. I notice, I'm looking at the 2015 September map here, and it looks like the full moon is on the 28th of September, and it looks like the new moon is on the 14th. Well, the way that affects the Arizona archery elk hunt, most hunts in Arizona start on September 11th on a Friday, and they go till September 24th, and then the early rifle hunt is the 25th, then through the October 1st, a Thursday. So that full moon is going to fall right during most of the early rifle hunts in Arizona. I'm curious from a wildlife biology standpoint what you feel the full moon has to do with the rut.
All right, well, before I dive into that, again, I'm laughing because I think after this, we just might as well dive into which is the best broadhead to use, because why don't we just
cover the most controversial topics?
Let's just stack all the controversial discussions in one. Yeah, all right, that is funny. Well, all right, before I give you my opinion, I want you to go back to what you just said. All right, now, I may or may not agree with anything or what you just said here, but you said, if I heard you correctly, that in paraphrasing, that when you see the full moon, that they're rutting like crazy.
Correct.
And then you went down the list of what you see that's correlated with it. You know, they're bugling at night, they're going to bed early, they're not as vocal during the day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Right. And then, conversely, during, let's say, mid-September when it's dark, I see them bugling less at night and bugling much more during the day and much more active during the day. So in huntable hours, I prefer to hunt in darker moons if the rut has already started.
Okay. Well, and that right there, I think is the crux of the controversy, because you hear people talking all the time about moon phase and the rut, but then when they say rut, people are talking about, in my opinion, talking about apples and oranges. Some people are talking about the rut, and they're actually talking about estrus cycling, but then other people are talking about, quote unquote, the rut, and what they're talking about is the observed behavior and activity of the elk that they're seeing out there. And again, this is where we go back to correlation is not necessarily causation. They link the two and say, well, because I hear a lot of bugling, because I see a lot of activity, and I see a behavior change, that must mean, therefore, then, that the estrus cycling has changed. If it changed with the full moon, then it must have changed with the estrus cycling. Therefore, the full moon affects the estrus cycling. And there is zero scientific data to suggest that. Now, I'll just throw that out there, because there's people that have. I mean, I'm looking at hold up. I'm holding it in my hand. I've got it. Here's the book. It's the book in my hand, written by Bernie Taylor, and I don't mind giving this book out because I think it's bunk. But it's called Biological Time, and this book was written basically showing all these correlations with, moon phase and serotonin levels and melatonin levels and hormone changes, blah, 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 and enzyme secretions and such from fish and from, all sorts of stuff. The problem is, as far as I know, and I just recently looked up some of this stuff and I haven't seen any change, and as far as I know, no one has ever been able to show any either medical or concrete biological, physiological effect of moon phase on reproductive cycling of estrus. Now, however, I can show you, and I've got that, you saw it, that entire video series on rethinking the rut. There's a whole pile of factors that affect estrus cycling in cows. None of it has to do with moon phase. And so I will agree with you on everything that you said about what you've seen around a full moon period, or what I classify it as a bright moon period, because you know that you get that last half as the
basically those 7 days.
There you go. Because, the 3 or 4 days before a full moon it's stinking bright, and then 3 or 4 days after a full moon is stinking bright. So, it's a bright moon phase.
Right.
So, yeah, I will agree with most of what you said as far as what I observe. Now, I will also say, however, that during a bright moon phase, sometimes that 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock time period in the middle of the day is absolutely awesome, because those elk, yes, they're out all night, they're feeding all night, they've got full bellies, Now when it comes, the morning starts creeping in, the daylight starts, they don't have to be out there as long, and so they go to bed. They typically, what I have observed as well, is that they go to bed early. Well, their stomach, them processing and going through their rumen contents does not change with the moon cycling, so it takes them 4 to 5 hours to go through a full gut. So if they go to bed early, they get hungry early, and which usually means at about 10, 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock, somewhere in there, they start getting restless, and so they start getting up, and if they feel safe and comfortable if they feel safe, especially, what you're talking about down in your area, I mean, you've got so many bulls down there that you'll get bulls in the middle of the day that start getting restless, and they'll come to a call, absolutely. So I will agree that I think the manifestation of behavior changes can happen with a full moon, but no, I do not believe anything really, really happens with estrus cycling.
I hunt Coues whitetail a lot, and I can tell you that, and I'll bring this full circle, but during a full moon, during those bright 7 days, even though we get out there before light and we're up on our point before it gets light, the activity level in those 7 bright days, and especially the 2 or 3 around really full type of moon, bright moon, you very rarely see any activity for the first 3 hours and the last 3 hours of the day. If I just had to choose, a 4-hour period to go glass Coues whitetail during a full moon phase, I would literally show up about 10 o'clock and glass from 10 to 2. So it makes total sense that the elk are up all night, just like the Coues deer, rutting around, feeding, doing their thing, because they can see, and they go to bed early, and 4 or 5 hours later, during the day, they decide, okay, I've laid down, now I'm going to get up, I'm going to feed a little bit, and that makes total sense.
And obviously, hunting middle of the day, you just got to be careful of the wind. The wind's swirling around. Now, I will say that I believe there is some even in the literature, in scientific literature, there is anecdotal evidence and some weak evidence to suggest that increased moonlight can increase the light that penetrates the eye, and it can, I won't say it can, there's anecdotal evidence that suggests that it might affect, say, serotonin levels or melatonin levels, and it might affect I don't know how to say it, maybe the excitability. How I've expressed it in the past is you can see a heightened level of activity around whatever cycle that they are in. So, yes, obviously you look at a bright moon phase at night, well, now it's nighttime. They feel extremely safe. All right, at night they feel extremely safe because they have better eyesight than most. And realistically, for us, the guys that are listening to this, guys and gals listening to us, in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, that have wolves and grizzlies, skip this section. But most of us, we don't have places where elk really have to deal with predators that bad. Yeah, we've got mountain lions. Yeah, we've got black bears. Yeah, we've got coyotes. But okay. So the number one predator for elk, especially in the fall, is going to be humans, period. And when we're dealing with fall hunting season, you know that there's a lot of human scent floating around in the air, and it puts them on edge. Well, at night, typically the thermals are different. Most people leave the field, so there's a lot less scent floating around. They feel a heck of a lot more safe to be out and about. So yes, they're going to be more apt to be out all night in a bright moon phase, but there's some evidence that suggests that maybe there is a little bit of a hormone or an enzyme or whatever secretion in the brain that can excite that behavior. And so if they were going to be bugling anyway, well, in a bright moon phase, maybe they're going to be more aggressive in their bugling or more intense in their bugling or more frequent in their bugling. If they're going to be moving from their pre-rut area to the rutting area, doing that pre-rut move. Well, maybe rather than, a little bit of movement activity during this time period, if it occurs if that time period that they behaviorally naturally want to do it based on photo period, if that time period just so happens to fall under a bright moon phase, well, you can see increased movement or further movement or more excited movement or whatever. So there are folks that say, and I kind of believe this, that under a bright moon phase, you can see heightened activity surrounding whatever behavioral cycle that they happen to be in. Make sense?
Well, and I also see, during bright moon days, bright moon nights is obviously in Arizona, speaking, specifically Arizona, congregation areas. It just seems in full moons, they congregate more, they get together more. That's probably due to the more movement, which means they run around more, they're chasing each other, they're, trying to breed, they're trying to carry on, which probably is the reason why they're going to bed early. It all has a chain reaction. I would ask you, from everything you just said, tactically, are there things that you would do differently, archery elk hunting, in a bright moon phase rather than a dark moon phase? And the obvious one I can think of is making sure you're out there at those prime times when they're going to be most active and recognize what they may or may not be doing because of being out all night partying with their buddies.
Yep, absolutely. Well, the number one thing, I guess there's not a number one thing, let me just list them. Number one, I will spend time at night. Out at night listening, and just where do they, and I will stay out all night long. I happen to work best at night anyway. I'm kind of a night owl anyway, so it doesn't really bother me. But while everybody else is headed back to camp and snuggling in their sleeping bags, I'm up there on the ridge going, okay, who sounds off first? And where? Where did they sound off? Okay, and then who else? Then who else? Now where are they going? Where are they moving? How are they traveling? Okay, so I know that that's where they were bedded. Now that's where they're feeding. Okay, I know where they're traveling. So I will stay out at night and listen and really figure out what movement is going on out there, because then the flip side of that is the next morning, and sometimes I'll just make my way over to these spots at night. Just in the pitch black, I'll walk right around the elk. Make sure my wind is not blowing down into them, but I will walk right around the elk, and I will literally go to where they kicked off that night and get in there first, because I know that in the morning, where most folks are getting out of their sleeping bag and they're walking down the trail or they're walking over the ridge, and then they go, okay, now where do I need to start? Well, at that time, if you've got a little sliver of turquoise or pink in the horizon, you're already behind them. And so they're already headed to their bedding area, or they're right smack dab in their bedding area. What I will do at that time, typically the wind currents are going to still be consistent and favorable. I'll use that night, and I'll work my way over there, and I'll just get into those areas where they're headed, those bedding areas, way earlier than they do. And literally where, on a quote unquote, a dark moon phase, the elk are still out in their meadow feeding, and they've got to walk a half mile to their bedding area. Well, during a bright moon phase, they're already at their bedding area. So rather than me spending my time at that feeding area in that meadow, I'm going to already be in their bedding area. And then the other thing, too, is I just watch that wind all morning long, and if I can, if for some reason the wind is consistent, if I can hunt midday, I absolutely hunt midday. And then the last thing is I really do pay attention, and you should figure it out pretty quick. And it can change before, if you're dealing with a rising moon versus a setting moon. A rising moon, it is brighter during sunset, it is brighter after sunset all night long than a setting moon, because as the moon starts to set and it goes past its full, that means that moon sets earlier too. So depending on where that moon is, you might see in some areas, well, the mornings are epic, but the evenings absolutely horrid. There's just nothing going on. Well, if that's the case, then I will just shift my hunting activity to capitalize on when they're moving, where they're moving, and if I need to sleep and catch up on sleep, I'll just do it when they're not active.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one thing I will say too that Dar and I have done quite a bit is, when there's quite a bit of moon and it's bright at night with the good binoculars, we use Swarovski binoculars, but any of the good binoculars, a lot of times you can get the wind right and move into those areas where the elk are at night with the moon and be looking, and you can find some of the biggest bulls at night just by using the moonlight and using good binoculars. At 150 yards, you can tell exactly how big a bull is. So I would encourage people to, the last thing you want to do is bump elk and get in there and stir them up and cause a bunch of human interference. But if you can get into those, on the edges of those open areas and listen to those different bulls bugling and say, okay, that's the big bull that we want to get in tomorrow, and sit there and listen to him interact for an hour or 2 hours, you will learn the nuances of his bugle, and that will put you a leg up in the next couple days as you're trying to target that bull because you know his voice.
Yeah.
And it absolutely can be done. We do it all the time. And it takes quite a bit of time to sit there and really listen to all the different bugles and his characteristics. Maybe he finishes on a chuckle, or maybe, you can hear those bulls and get to recognize those bulls. So that's a tactic that I would say guys could use on, brighter moon, phases. And, this is all good topic of conversation. Chris, I really appreciate all of your insight, and I want to give you a chance again to tell the listeners how they can find you, and more specifically, you gave a break to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast listeners last episode, and I want to make sure that they have the opportunity to take advantage of the elk module with the discount. I believe is $20.
Well, it's a 20% discount, which then translates into the elk module is like $20, and then the annual full year full access is $40. So yeah, it's a good deal. Yeah. It's a great steal.
It's a great deal, and I want to be clear. I am not getting paid one single dime to promote your business. I believe in your business, and I just want it to be clear that I'm kind of like the guy that emailed. I want to tell my listeners, you gotta invest in this resource, because for me, it's groundbreaking. It's stuff that I wish like the email said, I wish I would have heard 15 years ago.
Well, and yeah, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate it. I've over these years that we've kind of talked and I've gotten to know each other. I look at you. You guys are down there in Arizona just playing with some just giant bulls, and so I'm envious on that. But it's glad. I'm very happy to hear that some of what you've been able to pick up on the module helped you and your hunters. Again, you're talking about somebody that waited 20 years to draw a tag, and goodness gracious, you're not out there for meat at that point. You want the meat, but you're out there for a once in a lifetime opportunity, and if that can help, capitalize on that for some folks, that tickles me to no end. So. No, I appreciate it, and yeah, absolutely. If anybody just types in, they obviously just go to rowhuntingresources.com, ROE huntingresources.com, and then you can just sign in or sign up, and if in there it'll talk about a promo code, just all one word, J Scott Podcast. It'll just knock 20% off, and away you go.
And I want to make a point here. You also have a whole new bunch of videos that you are in the process of loading into the module, and which makes an already exhaustive and I mean that in a good word, module with lots of resource there. You're loading even more content on there as we speak.
Yeah, and one of the things that, I think we talked about last time and this time, I know, is the fact that, like I talk about with the glunk and some of the other stuff, I am always out there. Well, you said it yourself. The more you know, the more you learn, you realize the less you know. And I think the relevant fact of that is you're always learning and you're always testing what you've known and trying to prove it or disprove it. And that's kind of what we do with this stuff, is try to get the best information out there. And I just loaded a video that updates one of the vocalizations that I talk about. It's the vocalization that most people talk about when they talk about an estrus mu or estrus scream or estrus whine or estrus whatever. I don't buy into that, and I can show you why on video. However, I just posted an update to that I think people are going to find interesting, because the more that we watch it, I'm not convinced that that's a standalone vocalization. I think it might just be a progression of one of the previous vocalizations we already talked about. So that's the type of stuff that we're always doing in there. We're always adding more stuff and trying to push the envelope on what we know, what we understand, and give you guys the best information possible. So, yeah, I posted an update that very well may change or contradict or at least supplement some of the previously held stuff that we talked about before. So,
well, I appreciate all your work, and thanks for your support of the podcast, and continue doing the great work that you're doing. And I know we've got a lot of other topics to talk about that we'll talk about on future episodes, one of which is Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have a special episode with a good friend of the podcast, Chris Rowe of Rowe Hunting Resources. Chris, how you doing?
Doing all right, my friend. How are you?
Doing pretty good. We've had you on for a turkey episode and 2 elk episodes, and guys keep sending me messages asking for more, and thought I'd have you on again. We're getting pretty darn close to archery elk season starting, and thought it would be a great opportunity to have you on the podcast again. And I just was on Rowe Hunting Resources in the elk module and watched several of the new videos. One was very, very gut-wrenching, the High Country Redemption, showing your season last year, and to watch the highs and lows and the ups and downs. It's something that all of us that have hunted have been through, and I thought you captured the essence of the hunt and the essence of the situation. You captured it perfectly, and the crazy thing is you were all by yourself, and you were able to capture all of that, the true highs and lows, with the lows being the lowest of lows, and that was kind of an amazing hunt. I really appreciated you posting that, and it's not often that we see on YouTube or on hunting shows those low points, and the reality is, as hunters, it's something that we all face, and the people that have not faced it yet, they're gonna. They just have to hunt long enough.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people will be able to relate to it.
Yeah, and for those that haven't watched it yet, it's in the elk module. But basically, and actually it was my 2012 hunt. It was kind of I've been sitting on it for a while because, like you said, I mean, it's not something that's fun to watch. And for those who haven't seen it, I guess let me just kind of take a step back. Yeah, I shot this bull 11 yards. I thought the shot was perfect. I mean, it's 11 yards. Come on. It's 11 yards. And he was walking past me. I stopped him. He kind of went by me a little bit. And I knew he was quartering away, and I shot, and I thought I smoked him. I thought I put it right straight through his lungs and basically caught the offside leg, because I went and found my arrow, and it's covered in bubbles. It's passed through, so arrow's covered in blood, but there's bubbles all over the veins and all over the arrows, and so in the arrow, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, double lung hit, he's toast. and he runs down the hill and then stops. Where he stops, I can't get another shot into him, but he stops and he just stands there. And he stands there and he stands there and stands there, and so like minutes go by, every second that the clock ticks, now I'm like, something is not right. He should be just piled over. Well, the whole second half, the first half of the video is very consistent with the instructional stuff that we do on the module. There's a lot of instruction in, why I'm where I am, how am I doing it, why am I doing it, why am I calling this way, and et cetera, et cetera.
By the way, that was a textbook call-in. I mean, you were dictating the pace, you were waiting on him, you weren't over-calling. I thought, I love how you just let the camera run so people can actually realize the timing.
Yes.
Because
yes.
I think there's so much out there on how to call elk, but the reality is there's not a lot in the timing. And I think one of the things that I picked up, and not to get off the subject of what we're talking about, but I really like the fact that you let that bull think about it. You let him think about it, and then he finally hit you, and then you kind of answered back a little bit, with some emotion. But to see that textbook call-in with the few amount of calls that you actually gave was pretty cool.
Well, and I thank you. I mean, because it is when I'm sharing the video, and you kind of just touched on it. What you see on TV, on the outdoor channel or Sportsman channel or whatever, you've got, 22 minutes or 23 minutes of footage that you've got to pack in, and you can't think around. So you're just touching the highlights, bam, 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 bam. And so when you see somebody call in an elk, they're usually, here we are, we set up, we made some calls, ooh, the bull bugled, now he's in front of us, ooh, we killed him. Well, yeah, but that may have just taken you 10, 15, 20, however long it took. And so there's a balance on what you show and how you show it. And one thing that I learned pretty quickly, well, I guess I can't say I learned, I just committed to it. The time that lags in between me making a call and maybe the bull answering, or between me making a call and the bull actually coming in, I think is important for people to see, because that shows you that, yes, you do need to have some patience in letting setups work. Now, there's some videos I show, like the 108 video and the strategies and actions that, literally within 6 minutes, I located the bull, and the bull was 7 steps in front of me. I mean, it was just bam, right now. However, this one and some of the other ones, I mean, it takes, 10 minutes for that. I mean, I'm within 100 yards of him. He's probably 80 yards from me at this point. When I first started calling, it takes some time. Well, showing that, there's a lot of educational benefit from that. But by the same token, you're sitting there watching a bunch of nothing happen for 8 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. But that's why I put the commentary in there. Okay, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. This is why I'm patient. This is why I'm letting this work up. Let this setup work a little bit. Okay, the bull just did this. This is what he's thinking. Okay, so there's a lot of education to it, and there, I was worried when I first started that people would not appreciate the length that I allow the camera to go, but what I've received as feedback is that is why people absolutely love it, because now they get to see exactly what I see. I don't edit. The only time I edit stuff out, 99.9% of the time, the only time I edit stuff out is if I am moving from one point to the other and it's just random, just movement. There's nothing, okay, I'm making my way closer to the bull.
Well, and a lot of times, too, you'll give a time lapse of, okay, 5 minutes has expired, or 10 minutes, or I just got over here in 30 seconds. So, I think it's very important for people to understand that guys that are successful at calling, whether it be elk or turkeys, that you don't just make a call and they just run in. Sometimes that happens, but most of the time you have to finesse and you have to work those animals. And I think what I like so much about the strategies and actions, the videos, is it's taking a real life situation and you're playing the whole thing. So if you watch all the different videos, you kind of get a sense of, okay, that one was quick, okay, that one took longer, and I think it gives people a more realistic view of actually how the guys that consistently call stuff in, how they handle it. if you just heard an elk bugle and the next thing you know, which I got to be honest, most of my videos, I just show the elk coming in when they've finally, made their approach and are coming right in. I just cut right to the chase. But the reality is, from an educational standpoint, the timing is, I believe, as important as the sounds you're making.
And absolutely.
I think too many people expect it to happen right now, and he's not coming, and boom, they're off. Either going at him,
you nailed
and
it.
they walk right into him.
Yep.
Or they, leave and think that bull is not worth going after. I think people need to realize that most elk don't just come running over. Just like when your wife calls at you, most of the time you don't just, jump up and go running over.
Yeah.
Or if your buddy calls you, you're gonna work your way that way, but you may also, stop and grab your French fries off the counter or grab a drink or whatever.
Yeah.
Just like the elk. They may be going, okay, I'm going to go over there and see that cow, but I'm going to get a few more blades of grass here, and, by the way, I got to get a drink, and I got to take a leak, and I'm on my way.
Or in like I show in the video of the Shiner Bull, originally I got that whole sequence, and I thought it was pretty boring until I kind of took a step back and watched it. I'm like, no. It's not a sexy call-in, but what it showed was how, because it was open and the way that the train was, you could sit and watch the bull and what he was doing. The bull was interested. He knows where I am, but he just stands there and he looks and he's waiting to see the cow that he hears me calling. He's waiting to see the cow move. He's waiting to see some action. And what you just said, that people move in too quick, and I totally agree with that, because there's a lot of emphasis on aggressive tactics. People want to go. Okay, well, that's fine. But keep in mind that you may make a vocalization, and whether he bugles at you or he doesn't, if he hears you, and if you've been loud enough and he hears you, 99.9% of the time, he's going to pick his head up, he's going to be staring in your direction, he's going to have his ears locked, he's going to be looking and listening. And it's incredible, if you didn't sit and watch these videos, it's incredible to see some bulls just how long they stand and wait. And so having the patience to let the setup work is crucial, for, at least in my opinion, for my success, how I do things. That's crucial, and that's why I kind of let things run as long as they run. But to kind of bring it back to what we where we started, that section of the hunt, when you find them, you call them, and you bring them in and you kill them. Yay! That's the fun, awesome part. But for this particular video that you're talking about, the whole second half of that video, to be honest with you, it's 2012. I've sat on it for 3 years. Why? Because I didn't know if I wanted to share it. It's not. I'll tell people I broke down. I kind of lost it for a little bit. When you're saying the low of the lows, for 16 hours, trying to pick apart a mountain and sitting there waiting and second guessing myself and trying to figure out what's going on, and then I think I found him, and no, I didn't, and then I, run the mountain. Here it comes. Oh, I did find him, and oh, geez, now what am I going to do for the next 15 minutes? How am I going to make this happen? And then all of a sudden it happens, and then it was an emotional roller coaster, and I really, that's not something that you normally show, but I was going. Let me just say this, Jay. I was going to post it for the module guys, and I think I had gotten myself to that point where I was going to post it and share it, because I think there's a lot of lessons in it that's valuable. However, I will say that, one of the things that gave me confidence, I won't even say confidence, that kind of reassured me and kind of made me smile, was your podcast with Steven Ornella. That, he was talking about that when he got, first started going, they had those hunts that he thought were miserably unsuccessful. But yet the producers are like, oh no, this is awesome. And people loved seeing the hardship of the hunt. They loved seeing the fact that not every hunt is successful. It related to them. And so I think that's why, I am in a happier place, if you will, about what I put together in this video, how I presented it, the fact that, I shared some I mean, we got the bull. We got the bull, and
got the bull, got the meat,
yep,
and got everything.
Everything was fine. It worked out, but I think it's relatable. Like you said, if you have never been in the situation where you made a marginal hit, you just haven't hunted long enough. It will happen at some point. Now, the big question is, now what? Now what? What are you going to be able to follow through and do what it takes to get it done and finish the job?
Well, and I think watching the video brought up so many questions and comments from myself in things and thinking about situations that I've been in. I've got a couple questions that I want to ask you about the scenario when the bull was coming in, and I'm curious as to see your answer.
Okay.
When the bull committed and came through the opening in which you knew with the trails and such that he was going to come through, he then breaks into more of an opening. He looked like he was slightly downhill from you. He was walking from your from your right to left, and he finally came. There was one tree that he had to clear, and he finally comes walking, and which is going to make him in the wide open. One question I would have from you from a situational standpoint, at that point, if you would have already been at full draw, what do you think the outcome would have been? Would you have shot earlier, or would you have still kind of waited for him to swing? Because I kind of like the quartering away shot that you had.
Yeah.
But you would have been able to, if he would have stopped, and looked around, you would have been able to zip him if you were at full draw. Give me your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Quick answer, yes. Even now, when I watch it now, I sit there and beat myself up going, why are you not drawing your bow, and why are you not stopping him right there? I think you know this from cameras. Angles, up and down angles, it's hard, unless you're looking lateral to the mountain, it's really hard to really get a real appreciation of how steep something is. I might as well have been sitting in a tree stand. That was extremely sharp downhill. I mean, and
that doesn't come out as much in the video because of probably because of how wide of an angle it was. It doesn't come out.
Exactly. And a lot of times with photographs, when you're looking downhill, you just don't appreciate it. So that's why, part of my conundrum in that whole situation was the fact that I'm like, why is there no blood trail? I know my shot was entered high, and it had to come out low. And so I'm thinking, you should be just draining blood left and right. But anyway, no, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people that talk about a quartering away shot, and they like the idea that you can go through more of their lungs and more of their chest cavity. However, there's a fine line on how steep that angle gets. Truly believe I like a broadside shot, because if you mess up left or right a couple inches, you're still going to go through the heart lungs. You're still going to go through the heart lungs. However, you start putting a strong quartering away angle. If you, like me, I don't know how I did it, Jay. I don't know how I did it. Now. Well, let me just finish. Let me finish my thought, and then I'll kind of take a segue a minute. Right? So a hard quartering away angle. If you vary yourself a couple inches, you could significantly affect whether that arrow goes through one lung or it hits the liver and then goes out the far lung. You know what I mean? Just the way the angle is. So I would much rather shoot them broadside. Now, in this case, I'm not making excuses. All I will say is, I got the camera turned around, and this is the thing when you're doing a solo, you do it yourself, solo, I'm filming myself, I'm hunting myself, I'm doing everything myself. So I got the camera moved around, and the bull steps out and he clears, and so I get the release on the string. Hindsight 2020, I should have just drawn that bow. If he saw me, he would have stopped and looked, and it would have been over. But I thought, at that time, from what I remember, I thought I will let him just walk by me a little bit just so I'm kind of behind his peripheral vision, and then I'll stop him. Well, when I gave him that chuckle to stop him, he took 2 or 3 more steps and turned to go down the hill and then stopped. Well, he was more out of position than I would have liked. And so no, hindsight being 2020, I would have just stopped. I would have drawn my bow and stopped him right down below me to where he was broadside, and I would have just smoked him. And if I had made a bad shot and I was a couple inches off, it still would have double lunged him right then and there, and I don't think he would have died in the frame.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, and then the next thing is, and obviously you know that it's easy to look back at a video and be an armchair quarterback, but being an armchair quarterback, looking back at the video, okay, so you hit him, he kind of runs quarters down and kind of goes around, and you can just kind of see his head over there in the bushes, and he's standing. I think you put on the screen, that's when you knew something wasn't right. Yep. My question for you is, so in that situation, if you would have absolutely double lunged him, more than likely when he was over there standing still, he would have been wobbling and then started doing the funky chicken, and he would have tumbled over.
Yep.
At the point when you realize that that was not the case, now this is what I'm going to say. I always tell people, because I've had to go through this the hard way, no matter what, unless you see the elk fall, you wait a minimum of 30 minutes before you even attempt to go closer, to look for tracks, look for your arrow, and you may have cut. I don't know how the timing of the scene was. I want to get your take on either this situation or other situations. If you don't see that bull fall in eyesight, how long do you typically wait before you make a move?
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%, a minimum of 30 minutes. And I'm telling you, if you haven't been in that situation, 30 minutes might as well be 6 days. I mean, it seems like it's just forever, and so you're like, oh, it's 20 minutes, it's good enough. No, minimum 30. I actually like to set and say, okay, 45 minutes to an hour. And yes, this is a part that I did kind of truncate and cut down. I went down, in this video, I shoot, he's standing there, I say, okay, he's been there long enough, standing there, that something's not right. I'm going to kind of swing around, I'm going to drop down, I'm going to try to get another arrow into him, I'm going to see if I can do something. And so, as I go down, it doesn't work, he was out of position, blah, 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 blah. I pick up my arrow, I see my arrow, it's covered with bubbles, which most, if you got bubbles on your arrow, you say, okay, lung hit. Well, I did. I waited about 30 minutes, a little bit more than that, and then I went down and started following. Here's the other thing that I will say. Blood does not lie.
Yeah.
I had bubbles on my arrow. Yes, that indicates a lung hit. However, it does not indicate whether I hit a front lung, middle lung, or the tip top of the back edge of a lung. Depending on where you hit a lung, there's a huge variation on what that animal's going to do. If I punch the front of the lungs and I go right around the bronchial tubes and all the arteries that are around there, that bull is going to die within sight. If I hit him mid-lungs, just a center punch those lungs, it's away from the heart, he's going to die, and he's going to die pretty quick, but he's going to be able to move a little bit. He's going to move off a little ways. But if you catch the very tip top back of those lungs, or worse yet, you catch one lung, oh my gosh, they can go a long way. So I look at this and I watch this video, I'm like, Chris, you know better. I looked at the arrow, I said, I thought in my mind's eye, I thought I made a good shot. I was like, I saw where the arrow went. It looked to me, it went through both lungs. And so when I found my arrow and it had bubbles on it, in my mind I'm like, no, it went through both lungs, he should be dead. But when I showed the blood trail, and I'll bet you picked up on this. I picked up on it when I watched the video. I looked at it, I'm like, that's liver blood.
It's dark red.
Yep, it's a deep, and I was like, that's liver blood. If you see liver blood, just stop.
Yep.
Just stop. And just give him an hour or two. I'm serious, because if it's a liver shot, he's going to go a short ways, and he's going to bed down. He's not going to feel good. He's going to be sick. Just give him a couple hours. Even if he doesn't die within those couple hours, he's going to get sick. He's going to get stiffened up. He's not going to feel well. And he's going to be a little bit easier to approach when you do try to follow them up?
I think there's a bunch of lessons to be learned, and I think this video is probably going to be one of the most talked about and most coveted videos of the members of the elk module of Row Hunting Resources, because there's so many lessons to be learned from this. And I think one of them is you touched on it perfectly. Just because you have bubbles does not mean dead bull.
Yeah.
What it means is you've hit lungs. You don't know if you have double lung or single lung. If you double lung them, most of the time they fall within sight, and the distance in which it looked like that bull ran and was standing over there, that's long enough for you to think probably not double lung. Although he could have just walked behind that one tree and been laid down there and you wouldn't have known it.
Yep.
I think people need to know this. If you see dark red, that's most all the time liver. If you get bubbles, yes, that's lung, but it doesn't necessarily mean both lungs.
Yep.
So an elk on one lung can do amazing things. I've seen it. I've seen it in rifle situations. I've seen it in archery situations. And one lung, you are in for a long road, so you have to be patient.
Yeah.
I think one thing is important to note in that situation also. Let's say that you know that, let's say it's right before dark and you're real questionable about your hit. One of the things that I would say in that same scenario, and I want you to weigh in on this, is you have to be very careful that when you walk out to go to camp, to leave that bull, say if you have to leave him overnight, in my opinion, you want to walk 180 degrees the opposite direction the last place you saw the bull.
Yep.
Because if you don't go directly away from where you saw the bull, you have a chance of jumping that bull up. And I will say from experience of just elk hunting with friends and clients and what have you, if you jump a bull up wherever he's hit, your chances of finding him, in my opinion, just dropped at least 50%.
Yep. Jay, again, man, I agree with you. And in the video, I did the follow-up. I walked up. I said, okay, he was standing here. You see the blood pool. I watched him disappear right around this corner. I'm going to sneak up there. I'm going to see. Well, as soon as I take a couple steps, I can see the bull. He's still on his feet. He's alive. So I try to make a play to get another arrow into him. It doesn't work. He spooks, takes off down the hill. At that point, you see me, I cut back, and I'm way up on the mountain, and you nailed it. I talk about this. It's interesting. It's the same exact principle. I talk about this with turkey hunting. I talk about elk hunting. You'll hear people talk about, setting up, calling, getting a response that's close, and then moving forward to get set up, or moving left or right to get set up. And I have been caught sometimes. You take 2 steps forward, you take 2 steps left or right, and all of a sudden there might be an alley, a channel, or just a way the trees line up where, pink, there he is. He might be 100 yards away, but now, he just saw you, and you're busted. The same goes in this situation, because they will do squirrely things. And this bull, he did a huge button hook around, and yeah, if you just say, well, I'm out of here, and I just go, if you're not cognizant of how you're getting out of there, you absolutely could either run into him and bump him, or even worse yet, just have your scent drift over him to where he just picks up and he just sneaks out of there, and then you don't even hear a direction where he goes. We had in 2002, I remember this very, very clearly. In 2002, I was hunting with a buddy down in southern Colorado where it's very, very hot. I mean, we're talking 90-plus degrees in the afternoons. And same situation. Bull came in. We called the bull in. He made a shot. Ended up being pretty much almost identical shot like this one. The bull took off. We tracked it. Could not find it. So we backed out of there, decided to leave. Well, we came back the next morning, and we started with a different sunlight, just different light coming through the trees. We stopped right where he had stopped, or where he had shot the bull. We're standing there getting a game plan. I look up the hill, and I'm like, I don't remember a rock being up there. I put my binoculars up, and the bull's just laying there. The bull's laying 100 yards from us, right from where we shot him. He did this huge almost circle and came back. Well, if we hadn't, we went a little ways, we tracked him. As soon as we realized we couldn't find him, we were like, we're out. And we just slipped back. We just got out of there and just went and backtracked out the same way we came in. He never even saw us. He stayed there and he died, and everything was good. But I agree wholeheartedly. When you realize that you need to back out 180 degrees from just completely opposite of where you think that bull might end up. And in this case, I did. I just got out and I just climbed 3/4 of the way up the mountain just to make sure my scent wasn't out there. But here's the other thing that I mentioned, and I don't know if I touched on it enough, but I mentioned in there, part of the other reason why I climbed up the mountain was I wanted to get a vantage point. Because if that animal was still up on his feet and just kind of moseying and just trying to get out of Dodge, I wanted to be able to get above that timber and get myself in a spot where I'm going to...
You could watch.
Yep, I'm just going to sit and watch and make sure he does not leave this patch of timber. If I don't see him leave the patch of timber, then at least I have some sort of semblance of confidence in the morning that he's got to be in there somewhere. So
right.
That's another thing, too, is I know you talk about glassing, with elk where you are, but, for the high country stuff, sometimes, man, getting yourself out of there and in a vantage point and just sit and wait and let things go, come back the next morning, but sit and wait and watch until dark and make sure they don't leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely trying to get a bead on direction, because direction a lot of times is everything. And I think, and I'm giving this advice humbly, trying to give advice that I've seen through experiences, but I am in no means, some great tracker. I do pride myself on trying to be very detail-oriented, and I have in situations where I've been asked to come help buddies or what have you try and find elk. I have had pretty good success. One thing I would tell people, and we're getting a little bit off subject, but we're kind of in the realm of the subject, is Chris talked about in the video how the bull just through the pine needles just didn't leave any tracks. And that is absolutely at times will baffle you, and you will think there's no way the elk came through here. Chris saw the elk go through there and he still couldn't find tracks. So what do you do if you don't find tracks? Okay, so what I do is I always like to go back to Last Blood, and I always like to follow whatever track that I can follow from there. Even if there's a bunch of tracks going every direction, a lot of times I'll try and pick the same size track and try and use the direction that the elk is going and follow that track until I pick up some more sign, blood, where they've been drooling, different stuff that you can follow. But I think it's important to make note that when you are following tracks, they have to leave a track. They may go through a period 20, 30 yards where you can't see the track, but you will eventually find their tracks. They leave tracks. So a lot of times you have to get on your hands and knees and go one step at a time. I learned there's a guy from Utah, Lynn Hunt, Kanab, Utah, who is an incredible tracker, has a reputation of an incredible tracker. And one of the things, when a friend of mine shot a bull and Lynn was camped nearby, and we went over and got him, and one of the things I learned was he got on the bull's tracks kind of where before it was hit, and kind of got a feel for the stride of the bull. And then as I watched him track, he was kind of knowing where the front foot would step, knowing where the back foot, and I would see him kind of with his hands kind of just walking, and he was striding that bull. And it's worked for me several times where you kind of get a sense of the bull's stride, and the tracks don't lie. So you have to get on the tracks. And then a lot of times, once you follow a track for 100 or a couple hundred yards, boom, then you find another drop of blood, then you bring your GPS over, you've got your last blood, and then, you have to take it slow when you're tracking a wounded animal. You have to take it really slow, and you have to be very detail-oriented, and don't let anybody that's helping you get out in front of you and be making circles. There's a time to make grids, like Chris will show in the video. There's times for that when you've exhausted everything else. But if you can always go back to Last Blood and try and get on the tracks. That is your best chance to find a wounded animal.
Yeah, I agree, and and I guarantee you have a similar situation where you are. In my situation now, and again, not making excuses, I will say I am not at that level. I'm with you. I've seen some guys that are just incredible at they're like, nope, there's a track. Well, if you ever hunted Africa and you watch those trackers out there, I mean, my gosh, they just make you look pathetic. But there are some. It's an art form. I mean, it really is. And I've even watched some guys that they'll just lay. I mean, they'll flat lay on the ground, just lay on the ground. They're not looking for the track per se. They're just looking at where the needles got pushed up slightly more than they should be. You know what I mean? They're just. I mean, it's just the other thing too is sometimes you're going to get situations where all of a sudden the elk is going to run through areas where it's just littered with tracks. And so in my situation here, I mean, he went through the pine needles. I couldn't believe that I was not able to see. I just couldn't discern anything and then all of a sudden he got down, where he went, all of a sudden got into an area where, I mean, my gosh, there had been a whole pile of elk piling through there and in fresh tracks. So the other thing that I will do, me personally, and this is not foolproof, I will say that right now, but if you lose the track, see kind of what, look back, and I will mark with toilet paper or whatever, I will mark those spots of blood so that way I can look behind me and I can actually see the path. Visually, I can see flag of where the blood spots are and where he's traveling. And if he's moving at a decent clip, a lot of times you can just say, okay, that momentum is going to continue in kind of a general manner. So I'll turn around, I'll look and say, okay, where is the likely avenue that he went through? Sometimes you say, okay, well, there's the trail. He's been on this trail. The trail continues. He's probably still on the trail. And so You might be able to follow it 50, 60, 80 yards or more, and all of a sudden, boink, here's a drop of blood. You may not have had any sign that you were able to discern in that distance, but because it was a continuation of a logical progression, you were able to pick it up. However, that's if the animal is moving at a good clip. Typically, in my experience, if they're moving at a good clip, they will continue that momentum. However, but if all of a sudden you get down to where it's, drop, 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 and they are just walking and standing and walking and standing and walking and standing, don't automatically assume that they're just going to take the easy route, because that's where I've seen them start wandering and just doing all sorts of squirrely things where you're like, why the heck did you just walk through here? You just walked through a blowdown. Why did you walk? But they did. So take note of how the animal is moving, not just where the blood is. Is he moving quickly? Like you talk about the stride. Is he have that consistent stride? Or is he slowed down? Does it look like he's starting to wander? Does it look like he's standing there watching his back trail, figuring out what's going on, and is he adjusting accordingly? Because and that's the other thing too. If you start following that trail too early, he may be mortally wounded. He might be a dead bull on walking. But if you start following too quickly and he's up on his feet, he's going to be watching his back trail. And if he detects that something is following his back trail, that's when they start button hooking around. They start climbing. They start dropping. They start doing all sorts of squirrely things to get themselves into a position where they're out of the line of sight, but they can sit and watch where they just came from and keep tabs on whatever predator, whether it's me or whether it's a bear or anybody else, is following behind him. And if you're following too soon, you're just going to continually bump that elk, and you'll never even realize you're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. Chris, I want to tell you that video, like I said, is awesome, and I think you're going to get a lot of great feedback from the video, and I really appreciate you posting it. I know the elk module, the Row Hunting Resources guys, the members are going to love that. I want to shift focus a little bit and talk to you a little bit about selfish mew versus the estrus scream. I noticed in the module you talk about that, and we don't have to go into super detail, but it's interesting. You may have seemed to have changed a bit of your understanding of those two different calls.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, the beauty of videoing everything that we do and going out and just videoing raw behavior, not even in a hunting situation, just videoing and recording vocalizations and behavior repeatedly. We started seeing it, for people that don't understand, you'll hear people talk about the estrus mew, the estrus whine, the estrus scream, estrus whatever. I do not subscribe to that terminology per se. I do not believe there is a specific vocalization that actually relays estrus anything. Now, it doesn't mean that this vocalization exists. We've got video of it, and there's other people that share video of it. It's not saying that the vocalization, that really raspy, loud, long, drawn out, scream or mew that you'll hear people talk about. Yes, cow, elk will do that. I just don't think, and I can show you why, but I don't think it has anything to do with estrus. Now, that's not to say that I'm not going to criticize anybody that wants to call it that or wants to associate with that, because it can
Chris, let's look at it from a perspective of, I think Steve Chappell's got some great video of an elk doing that, and I think Will Primos, I think, is the one that coined the term estrus scream. Then it was the Chappell scream, and I will be honest, at the time, I think it was an incredible marketing strategy to say that, because who doesn't want to have a call that mimics the estrus sound?
Yes.
Now, in everybody's defense, I don't think anybody did anything to try and mislead. Nope. I think it could be very well argued that it is the estrus sound, but I think you're right in that we hear that sound in other situations that are not even in the breeding period at all.
Yes, exactly.
So I think that leads me to kind of think what you're saying is it's more of the selfish mew, and a cow that really wants attention.
Well,
really is demanding attention for whatever reason.
Exactly, and we actually, even in the on the video there, elk herd on the move, there is a large group of cows and calves. They're all moving together. They have a very large, a very mature herd bull right there. And here are these cows doing that vocalization with the bull standing behind them. He isn't even paying 2 cents of attention to him. And they have no care in the world about this bull. But they stop doing it when the calf shows up. And so that's what I started really looking at. I'm like, well, hold on a minute. People were always saying that it's a unique vocalization. And at first, when we first started the elk module, I was like, all right, well, I can go with that. I'll buy into that ideology, if you will, or that idea or theory, if you will. But I don't think it has to do with estrus anything. However, over time, what we started looking at is, if you see when they do this vocalization, in the situations that they're in, what they're trying to accomplish, who they're communicating with, what the update video talks about is, I am not convinced anymore that in fact it is its own particular vocalization. It very well may be just nothing more than an extension of a lost mew that just carries the intensity higher, 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 and higher. So if you look at the progression of vocalizations, you've got the lost mew. Everybody talks about the lost mew, and it's legit. It's, looking for a response. But then, the cows, they can take that lost mew, they can be louder with it, they can drag it out longer, they can add those frustrated whines to it and add that emotion. They can do, long mews, they can stretch it out and really be a little bit, what some people call pleading with it. But yet, when you still continue up that continuum, at some point, you can only get so loud. At some point, you can only drag it out so much. Whereas if all you do is you add a little bit of a growl to it, you've just increased that intensity. You've increased increased the intensity, and you've changed that intensity to the utmost level. it really does coincide with everything that a lost mew does. It's just extremely intense. And so that's kind of where I'm starting to think, rethink myself on saying, I don't know if it's actually a standalone vocalization. I really do. I'm changing my mind now to where I really do think it's nothing more than an extension of the intensity level of a lost mew.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff right there, Chris. I think in our next episode we're going to talk about getting ready for elk season, trail cameras, using glassing as an effective tactic for hunting elk. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of your targeted strategies.
Sure.
But I think we've had a great episode here, and I think people are going to enjoy it. And Chris, I'd like you to tell the listeners how they can find you and the best way to get a hold of you.
Yeah, they can just the best way to get with the elk module stuff is just go to www.rowhuntingresources.com, just ROE huntingresources.com. They can also find us on YouTube. We have our YouTube channel that's Row Hunting Resources. We have our Facebook page that's Row Hunting Resources, Instagram, the whole 9 yards. But if they want to get in the module, just go to www.rowhuntingresources.com. And like always, for you guys, anybody who's listening to this, we offer a 20% discount off of it. All you need to do is when you go to sign up, there's a little spot there that says, if you want to put a coupon code or a promo code or something like that, just click on that and just J Scott Podcast, all one word, J Scott Podcast, and knocks 20% off, and away you go. So,
and I think I might add too that as extensive as the elk module is in the spring, I get a real kick out of the turkey module. I'm not much of a whitetail hunter, but I know that the whitetail portion of the module with the behavioral and all the different stuff is just as extensive. So you have the Row Hunting Resources membership, which is the full membership. I believe it's a 1-year membership.
Yep.
You can correct me. And then they can also sign up for the elk module, the turkey module, and the deer module on their own. Is that correct?
That's right. And most people, you're absolutely right. Most people, if you want it year-long, if you just want the full library card, and that's how I kind of classify this. Basically, what you're doing for the subscription, it just gives you a library card that you can get in there and look at what's in there. If you just want the elk stuff, you can just get the elk module. It's 3 months, and with the J Scott Podcast discount, it's $20. I mean, it's pretty cheap. So you can watch it for 3 months. But if you want everything, you can get the annual subscription. That's 365 days a year. That's all year long, and it opens up the turkey module and the deer module. Now, I will say for everybody, we've got over 18 hours now of video for elk, but the turkey and the deer are not nearly as big. But there's still really good stuff in there. But you can also, if all you care about in the spring is turkeys, you say get the elk module now, but you're not, in this spring, winter, or whatever, you want to get some turkey stuff. Yeah. I think that's $15 or something like that. So yeah, you can log in 3 months, just watch the turkey stuff or the deer stuff or whatever you want. So
awesome, buddy. Well, it's always awesome having you on. We get tons of feedback from the 3 episodes that you've been on, the 1 turkey and the 2 elk episodes. Tons and tons of comments and feedback, and I know that people really enjoy. I've gotten emails back from people that have signed up for the Row Hunting Resources modules, and them telling me how thankful they are that I pointed this out to them. And so, kudos to you for the hard work, and I look forward to our next episode. It's going to be a great 2015 elk season, and the next episode we'll touch on kind of getting prepared for the season and all the different things that you're doing. We're going to talk about trail cameras and glassing. So until then, buddy, God bless you, and we'll talk to you next time.
Absolutely. I appreciate the time that you had me on, and look forward to it again. So, yeah, God bless.